Blog
Check
Talk
one.
Radio.
Check one.
Here we go with the main event of the evening. Ladies and gentlemen in attendance, boxing fans joining us around the world. It's time for the bout you've all been waiting for. Finally, it is showtime.
Here, man, we dedicate our life to this sport. We do thousands of sit-ups in camp. We run hundreds of miles, for the ones that take it serious. And we just dedicate ourselves fully to our craft, man. We watch tape. We have attitude. We're rooting, and we go into that fight just to land on the line.
Hey, what's up, boxing fans? This is the Rope a Dope Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carlson. We are live on a Tuesday night. Hope everybody's doing okay. I'm doing pretty good. The weather's pretty crummy over here, but it's spring in Minnesota. Obviously, there is a variety of items going on here in the state. That definitely is on my mind. I'm sure it's on some others as well. Anyway, we are going to start the show in the ring, which is normally what we like to do. Now, if there's some crazy breaking news, we start with that, but it has to be pretty big. And right now, that's not the case. So we'll start in the ring. Busy fight weekend full of great performances, back and forth fights. Some competitive fights that we didn't see. You know what I mean? Rodriguez on Showtime showed up, and Bridges did too. UK fans, by the way, she showed up. I suppose she's from Australia though, huh? Or New Zealand. Anyway, I'm all over the place. Joe Smith Jr. sneaks by Maxim Vlasov, and Boots Ennis knocks out Lipinets and looks great doing it. So we are going to start. Connor Benn looked good in a quick little fight, early stoppage, but whatever. So we'll definitely start in the ring, like I said. We'll preview the fight weekend. A lot of folks are just kind of all over the place when it comes to this weekend. The hardcore fight fans are probably thinking it's a pretty shitty weekend. There's really not that many fights to look forward to. Some folks, especially some media members, okay with pay-per-view now. They're pumped up about this Jake Paul fight. We're not going to do some kind of big preview and prediction segment on it, but we'll talk about it. We're talking about it right now. In fact, it's your cup of tea. I always talk about pay-per-views based off what you feel like is value, entertainment value. Now, obviously, this pay-per-view is more heavy on the entertainment than it is on the fights. And however you want to look at that, however you want to register that, like I said, entertainment value, you are paying for music groups as well, and performers and whatnot. I'm big on fights. Whatever, if it's free or, on cable or a pay-per-view, and no matter how good the broadcast team is, or not just the team, but like the look of it will be brilliant. I mean, I think that's a given based off the last pay-per-view they did. But no matter what it is, no matter who's broadcasting, what the broadcast looks like, for me, it's always going to be about the fights. Now, I comment on the broadcast or something silly or something just plain stupid or give compliments, whatever, but I'm really more worried about the fights. So we'll talk about this weekend. We do have an in-depth topic to United States boxing. Over the last, say, 5-6 years, we started to see this takeover of the United States. Whether, it kind of started with the UK because they started to not just have like a popular fighter like Joshua, but fighters like Kell Brook come over here and beat Porter and Carl Frampton. And, we started to see some growth there majorly, really. Not just, like I said, in the popularity and in the crowds in the UK, shouts out to the UK fans, but in the quality of fighters. Then it was kind of the Eastern European, Kazakhstan, and of course the Ukraine. Well, it was kind of UK Russia at the start, Kovalev and whatnot, but then the Eastern European, Kazakhstan, the Usyks, of course the Lomachenko, Golovkin, like I said, Kovalev, Uzbekistan is something that looks like they have a lot of talent coming up as well in that region. But, we just heard a lot about the takeover. The takeover. It's coming. It's here. It's now. The Eastern European takeover is what we talked about, or that what we kept hearing. And not just from fans from those areas, but from the media as well. A lot of part-time media as well. Well, did that takeover already happen, or is it going to happen soon? Uzbekistan's gonna knock them over the bunch there, over the hump, I should say. So it's kind of U.S. versus the world little rivalry, especially on boxing Twitter that started. It's good fun. It is good fun. Last week I had a little rant that, rustled some feathers, and that's okay. But tonight we're going to talk about the USA boxing talent in depth, whether it's guys that have just a couple more years left or they're in their prime, let's say, for the next 3 to 5 years, whether it's a contender that either got, has like an interim belt or not a great belt or anything, but they're about to, quote-unquote, take over at their weight division, or just the quality of guys coming up, let's say 20 fights and down. The list is actually longer than you think. Let's put it that way. And like I said, I have no problems with all these fighters, whether they're fighting in their home country or, of course, the UK's big. Australia's starting to get someplace, Japan as well. But it's not like a beef or, we have this conversation because we're just trying to do clickbait and that's it type thing. Oh, just clickbait. Yeah, it's going to rile some people up. I can already see on Twitter I got a couple of messages from a poll that I had. We'll get into that a little bit. But we're going to dig into this United States of America talent because, like I said, it's deeper than you think. And for the 2020s, I don't foresee a takeover happening. But who knows? Who knows? There is some other news out there. Tyson Fury is starting training camp in Las Vegas. Some folks thought, well, that's where he's always going to train now. Other folks thought, well, I thought he was training here or there or whatever. What does that mean? Is that fight with him and AJ actually going to happen this summer? Is it not going so well in arbitration that the Wilder fight's going to end up happening and they're going to wait a little bit to the end of the year or whatnot? I don't really totally know. But there is some current fight news that we'll talk about. Showtime, I don't know if it's going to be tomorrow or the next day or next week, but Showtime's schedule announcement is coming soon. I know I've said that, I think, twice in the last probably 2 episodes, but with the amount of leaks coming out, it's coming soon, and it looks pretty damn good. We'll see. We'll see where that's at. And there's some other news out there, some current fight news, and, of course, we usually close the show on our boxing Twitter segment where we just pick out kind of like where you're like, yes, that is well said, or just fanboy tweets, media members acting like fanboy tweets is always fun as well. Some people get a little butthurt from that, but hey, you're the one tweeting it. You're the one tweeting it. So if this is your first time, we'll get to this stuff in just a second, though. If this is your first time listening to the Rope-A-Dope Radio podcast, welcome. It streams live right here on blogtalkradio.com/Rope-A-Dope Radio. But, you know, you don't have to download the show directly at Blog Talk and Rope-A-Dope, or if you're listening to the browser, that's cool. If you don't want to do that, you can find the Rope-A-Dope Radio Podcast, which is boxing heavy, but we do football and basketball too. You can find the platform on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Player FM, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spreaker, really across the board. We're also part of the Grueling Truth Sports Podcast Network, which can be found a whole lot of places. While you're at it, why don't you head on over to thegruelingtruth.com. It's boxing, football, baseball, basketball, everything in between. And one more thing, if you're thinking about cutting the cord or you're happy and you're not quite happy, I got something for you. It's called AT&T TV. The plans start as low as $69 a month. Simple pricing, no hidden fees, no annual contract. You can stream it anywhere at any device. Right now, Showtime's only $11 on the platform, boxing fans. The cloud DVR is available, and if you sign up for the choice package, that gives you a free month of HBO Max, and for a limited time, the NBA League Pass Premium, because the basketball, the NBA, since the late start, goes another month or so, regular season-wise, of course. That's AT&T TV. Okay. All right, let's get into this. Let me just get a little sip of water. Hope everybody's doing okay. Oh, damn, my phone is off the what the hell? Oh, yeah, okay. My bad. That's just the curfew. Curfew kicks in at 10 o'clock, not 7 last night. All right. So this weekend, obviously, like I mentioned, there were some fights that were closer than we probably thought. The Joe Smith Jr. Maxim Vlasov was very, very tight. We're going to talk to John in just a couple of minutes here. He actually was one of those saying, hey, this isn't just a gimme fight like some folks were saying. I thought it was a really fun weekend. Obviously, for me, it's highlighted by that really competitive fight on ESPN, of course. Boots Ennis scored the very impressive knockout. Now, he did get touched up a fair amount with some clean shots, but that's also why we like the fight. Some people are overreacting as if this dude's going to knock out Spence and Crawford. Some folks are like, hold on, pump the brakes. He just beat Lipinets. Look at how easy he got hit. Or not easy, but, the clean shots. But guys like Mikey Garcia got hit clean against Lipinets as well. But either way, he put on a hell of a performance. There's no doubt about that as far as him being a full-on, ready-to-go contender. It'll be interesting to see how, his representation gets figured out. And whether that will hold him back or he'll sign like a co-promotion thing after, or just be promoted by someone or managed by someone and then sign on with Al as well so he can go and get more high level PBC guys. We'll see. Stanonius against Delorme, the first chunk of that fight, I thought was a very good fight. I thought it was very competitive through probably 7 rounds. I gave Delorme, it was close through 7 or 8 rounds. Then Stanonius took over the fight, but it took him a while to warm up, it seems. I did like how Delorme, of course, he's got a really good jab. Landed a really nice right hand to the body as well. And he was outboxing him for a while, doing more body work. Through the first 3 rounds, you could start to see Stanonius start to use his jab better. But then to me, like in the 2nd or 3rd round, but it would seem like Delorme closed stronger, with the right hand to the head and body, because he started to the body, then he went to the head. But then I thought a couple of rounds behind that stiff jab, actually almost clipped him, my 4th round or whatever. That was a competitive round. Good back and forth. But he started to be able to cut the ring off on Delorme. Never quite did it all the way until later in the fight. But it just seems like he's just stayed Stanonius with the jab so long, which it was solid and it was landing, but he wasn't throwing enough right hands. And once he started opening that up, you could kind of see Delorme, instead of moving well and boxing well, he was more on the move. He was more kind of on the move. Some people just call it running. Some people say getting on your 10 speed. He definitely was trying to evade it. You know what I mean? No doubt about it. But along with that power jab, started working with both hands, I thought, with hooks. Some of his best lands were left and right hooks. Even late, though, the 10th round was a fun two-way round. I mean, it wasn't just a walk in the park late. But overall, Delorme kind of faded down the stretch, like he kind of does. There was 115, 113, 116, 112, and 117, 111. I didn't see the 9-3, but I had it about 8-4. I could see 7-5. If I got an 8-4, maybe 9-3 is more open. But yeah, I had it about 8-4. I think I'd be closer. Well, I like 8-4. I'd say stuck on, should I go 9-3 or 7-5? Like lean one way or the other. I really don't know. Both of them very active though. Delorme threw more punches, 765, but he got outlanded 232 to 193 and 123 to 73 for jabs for Stanonius. That's pretty impressive. So I liked what I saw. I think we did see. I wouldn't go and call them like over the top flaws, but I think it's a good work in progress fight for him. And I don't know if I'd step him up too high yet. I think he still needs to keep progressing at the rate that they have him on. But overall, a good performance. The opener, I mean, Rodriguez came out and had a hell of a fight. I had it 114, 113, or 115, 112. I mean, it was a competitive-ass fight. Very, very close. 7-5, 6-6. We'll get into some more of this here. But that was a good fight. That like I mentioned, kind of lived up to a back and forth fight, much more than I thought. But as far as Smith and Vlasov, this was a tough one. This was a tough one to score for me. 6-6 or 7-5 Vlasov or 7-5 Smith. To be honest with you, this one was really competitive. That awkward, herky-jerky style. And it just seemed like for long periods of time, Vlasov was busier too. Now, the big shots, that was the one thing. Smith gets hit a lot, and he got hit a lot in this one. But sometimes the uppercut or some kind of big shot, would be solid for Vlasov. Some of it was just kind of steady, busy work. But Smith took, I gave Vlasov 3 out of the first 4 rounds, or at least 2-2. I thought Smith kind of started to find his groove more in the middle. If you look at the 5th, if you look at the 7th, the 8th was very close. It was a back-and-forth fight, a lot of exchanges. Like I said, Smith at times was just getting overwhelmed in moments, but he closed really strong, and he actually ended up outlanding him, I think, 226 to 209, I wrote down after the fight. One scorecard had it 114, 114, and then 115, 113, and 115, I believe 112 for Joe Smith Jr. So at least the scorecards were within the range. Like I said, it could have went either way. It really could have. Joe Smith Jr. was just having problems. I mean, once he started to be able to attack the body and head, and I don't know, he did have that back of the head shot. I remember, 10th or 11th or whatever. That was a pause in the fight. But Vlasov had this pressure style where he was backing Joe Smith Jr. up, but then it was also like the in and out, where he'd be gone too. I think the 7th round, Smith hurt him with a huge left hook and a few, I believe, overhand rights. And and more rights to the body late in that round, too, and in exchange, he caught him. And I'd say Smith probably hurt Vlasov more, you know what I mean? I don't really see Smith that hurt in the fight if I'm thinking off the top of my head. But Smith early in the fight, in the first handful of rounds, the reason why I only gave him, at best 2-2 through 4 was because he was missing a lot of his hooks and some of them just really badly. So the awkward style, though, of Vlasov definitely had something to do with that. But overall, a fun weekend, no doubt about it. I'm going to go ahead and bring in a great boxing mind, John, to kind of break this stuff down. I was thinking of that Vlasov comment you made last week and how he really did give Joe Smith Jr. a damn good fight. We're going to break it down with him. We're going to talk about the weekend, and then we're going to look at the American boxing talent in the depth of American boxing, basically for the 2020s, whether it's guys that are a couple years left, 3 to 5 years left, or prospects, contenders, that type of thing. I'm going to go ahead and bring in John right now, though, to the fold. What's going on, John? How you doing, man?
Hey, Chris. Great to be here. Good setup. Talking about last weekend's action, and we'll have a deep dive, as you said, into American boxing that I think everyone will find interesting tonight.
And
so a lot of stuff,
we're actually going to do it too tonight. I'm glad that we got that little thing out of the way last week, although I did get a fair amount of messages, some agreeing, some, of course, disagreeing. That's boxing, Twitter, and Facebook and all that stuff. But, yeah, I'm looking forward to that segment coming up in a couple of minutes. Since you brought up, we'll get to Boots, and it feels like we should start with Boots, but I do kind of want to highlight Joe Smith Jr. and Maxim Vlasov, because I remember your comments last week saying, hey, don't sleep on this fight. This isn't some kind of gimme knockout win for Joe Smith Jr.
Yeah, I was, familiar with Vlasov and saw him fight Gilberto Ramirez on HBO in HBO's latter days of still being in the sport and give him a good fight. So I thought he was a little bit underrated, but, I'm a big believer in Joe Smith, and I know people had noticed his recent improvement, but I thought he was a competent defensive boxer before that, defensively responsible, even though his calling card is his punching power, two-handed punching power that he has. Notice, ironically, one of the reasons why he had some trouble in this fight, and you could see his corner, or hear his corner telling him some of that during the fight, and you alluded to it, was, and he definitely landed the better shots throughout the fight and landed a good percentage of them too. But getting back to the point, he was not working behind his jab in this fight. He was just loading up with his left hooks and big right hands, and that can become effective for him. But he also misses a lot more that way too. And then you could see later in the fight when they were telling him, he was kind of trying to force the jab a little bit, but his heart just wasn't in it in this fight. He wanted to load up, and ironically though, I think actually even doing that, I think it was enough. I think it was a close fight, but I think he did enough to win. I just think he landed it's pro boxing, and he landed the bigger shots. He landed a good percentage of them, and Vlasov wasn't really landing any big shots, even though he opened up a cut. Now, in the ninth, Smith tired a little bit, and Vlasov was landing some shots. At that moment in the fight, it looked like it might be bad for Smith, like he might be gassing out, and Vlasov had a high volume, as you mentioned. But what you never know, and if you're involved in athletics that involve any kind of endurance, even scientifically, there is something to getting a second win when some endorphins kick in. That's what it looked like happened with Joe Smith in the 10th, 11th, and 12th, because just when it was looking like his darkest moments, he came on, and then he really was battering Vlasov with power shots later in the fight and came close to getting him out of there in that instantly famous round where the action got stopped because, they said he hit him behind the head, and and Vlasov took some time, and Vlasov looked like he was just about ready to go there. But he was able to then had the time to pull it together and was able to last to the end. But, Joe Smith was coming on strong then in the 12th round, and he really seized control back of that fight. I think it was enough to win. It was definitely a close fight. Like you said, I wouldn't have, and I don't fault anybody who thought Vlasov won or had it a draw, but what I do fault on this one is I saw a couple of comments out there on Twitter, really, to me, from people who should know better, who are pretty knowledgeable, but, there weren't a lot of them, but a couple that, Vlasov got robbed and they had him winning 8 rounds. No, not in this one, not with the power shots that Smith was landing compared to Vlasov, who was just moving his hands a lot of the time, which this is that thing we talk about, Chris, where it's, and, I think this did apply really with Vlasov in that fight. I mean, it's pro boxing, and, Joe Smith is the guy that definitely fits that because he's about power. And Vlasov was just pitter-pattering a lot. Now, there were some moments he maybe had Joe Smith slightly rattled, but a lot of it was pitter-pattering and just moving his hands and not landing a lot of great stuff. And, it's the pros. It's not the amateurs.
Yeah, it's very true. There were some uppercuts or whatever, and I did think he did a good job of pushing Joe Smith back, which you don't see that often. And that herky-jerky style is fun to watch. And how he puts himself into danger, John, but he has this way of just moving his head or upper body or blocking a shot. He is tough to figure out a little bit, especially if you're kind of a guy that likes to load up on shots like Smith. He wasn't going to the body early, too. That kind of hurt him. And between Bradley and his corner saying, hey, go to the body, dude, that's not going to move. Well, Vlasov kind of moves that body awkwardly, actually. But, overall, I actually watched a chunk of it today. And the first 6 rounds, I think I gave Vlasov maybe 1 extra in there or whatever. But it was a good fight, no doubt about it. How do you think Joe Smith Jr. does against like a better Bayev or however you say it? There's like 4 different ways to say it. But how do you see that one going down? Because a lot of people now, basically off of one big win, and he's had injury and promo issues and promotional issues and all that over the years, better Bayev. But how do you see that fight going down? Is it like I'm not going to say 50-50, but is it like a 60-40, or you just think better Bayev is just that much more powerful and it'll be a war and he'll knock him out?
No, I think that's a close one. I thought too many people discounted Joe Smith immediately after this weekend. I have a lot of respect for, better Bayev's talent. I think he's, more talented than Vlasov, and he does some things that remind me of Tyson, the way he throws his combinations sometime. And of course, that's certainly a compliment when we talk about power punching. But, he has had his moments of flaws in his career too. And he is a guy I have watched a lot of because I've always liked him. But sometimes, and you've seen it in quite a few of his fights. Now, in his signature performance, to his credit, he did not do this, but I've seen him do it plenty other times. He has a great amateur pedigree, but for a guy who punches as hard as he does, I've seen him at times actually fall too much in love with his own boxing, thinking that he's, more of a technical boxer that is gonna box his way to a victory, and that's going to be a key for him. And it's really, leaves his opponents in the fight longer than they should, and he has been dropped, on a couple of occasions. He got dropped by Jerry Page. I saw that fight. That was, again, when HBO was still broadcasting and they were throwing some of their lower profile fights on HBO Latino. And I believe that's where I saw better Bayev. But I'm glad I saw that because Page came right out, hit him with a good left hook and dropped him. And better Bayev came on strong and ended up knocking him out. But, then we saw Callum Johnson knock him down. And look, these modern-day light heavies who don't have to weigh in the day of the fight, they're bringing a lot of power. I mean, it's a very exciting division. We saw a great fight with Smith and Vlasov just this weekend. these guys are bringing a lot of power. It's a very exciting division. I think especially with today, with these guys, with them not weighing in the day of the fight, these guys at light heavyweight are coming into these fights at like 188 pounds. So that's bringing a kind of power that if you hit somebody right, you can knock anybody down or out. And that's why I mentioned that with Benavidez, because I think now with today's light heavyweight division, you see a lot of people getting hurt and getting dropped. So you can't necessarily say he's got a weak chin, but we've seen him dented, and Smith's a big power puncher. So I think Smith's got a shot. And Benavidez 6 foot tall. Vlasov is 6'3". I think Smith did not have the confidence in his jab in this fight because of that, fighting the taller guy. I know Vlasov wasn't really fighting necessarily that tall, and like you said, he's got an awkward, weird style. But I do think that was it. I think early on in that fight, Smith just lost confidence in working behind his jab. He tried to get it back later, but his heart didn't look into it. He was just going to try to reach Vlasov by, loading up on those bombs. And that's what he did the whole fight. And wasn't enough to get Vlasov out of there, but I think he landed enough. And even punched, a lot of times CompuBox is overrated, but I like to look at it sometimes for some things. And Smith, because Smith's a power puncher, and
right.
He landed a high percentage of his power punches. So that, to me, just kind of supported what I felt happened in the fight with Smith pulling it out, that, he's a big puncher who was landing a good percentage of his big punches. And that was, I think, enough for him to win.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mentioned that earlier as far as him overtaking him, 226 to 209, whatever those numbers mean. But like you said, to your point, if you're not the volume guy, the pity-pat uppercut once in a while, big, shot or power shot once in a while, but you're trying to really do damage to outland the guy who's supposedly going to outland you, outbox you, that does tell you something. On the heavyweight prospect level, your guy Efe Ajagba scored a nasty knockout, and Jared Anderson kept his knockout streak alive as well. What'd you think of those two?
I mean, Anderson's opponent didn't come to fight, Karpency. Let's face it. You just have to say what it was. I mean, and that's who Anderson got. But I like Anderson. I like about Anderson what everybody's saying. I think it is a valid point. We haven't had an American heavyweight prospect for a long time who had a lot of talent, who, didn't come to the sport later. I mean, Anderson's a young guy now who's been fighting, and that's the way it used to be. So it's just exciting, really, because in the U.S. we've still always had that in other divisions, but we haven't had it in recent times at heavyweight, and it's very exciting for the Americans to see somebody like Jared Anderson who, he's a young guy coming up, very young for a heavyweight, and he's been boxing for a long time. I completely think he's for real. All his wins have been by knockout. And I think Kingsley EBay was fighting well enough. He had that draw with Vianello, and, Anderson did have a little bit of trouble with him early, then caught him with the big bomb late and just ended up creating a highlight reel. That was his fight before this. I don't think, understandably, anybody is particularly anxious to get in the ring with Jared Anderson right now, and I think Anderson knows it, and Karpency wasn't. So that was, Anderson's very impressive. He's an exciting guy to watch. Wish even at this point, even at the 8-fight mark, that Top Rank had a little better opponent where you can, you want this guy on ESPN. Now, the other guy you mentioned, who I have been a big believer in throughout his career, I thought just in terms of exposure, I thought PBC had him in a good spot. Didn't quite, from the outside, understand why he left. Not any bias or anything, just facts. But to me, I didn't love Howard as the opponent, but to me, Top Rank was doing with him this week what they should have been doing. Good slot right before Joe Smith. This guy's got to be out there, to me, headlining or co-headlining on ESPN, not ESPN Plus, and it seemed like Top Rank got that at least this week. And Ajagba delivered with a one-punch shot. Howard's 40 years old. He's not that big for a heavyweight. But Frank Sanchez took a little while to get him out of there. And, Frank Sanchez does have some talent. And he's training with Reynoso now. Doesn't always look the best, but there's enough talent there you can't can't completely discount him either. And, you know, Ajagba got rid of Howard quickly and marketed himself with a highlight reel KO that you like to see. I've already been saying that Ajagba for a couple of fights now since he went to Top Rank, and I'll say it for Anderson because he himself said it and I liked it. A guy, frankly, not picking on him, but just the truth, even though he's, you know, about 40 now, Carlos Tacom, to me, prime Carlos Tacom was never that special. Why I say that is, you know, a Carlos Tacom at about age 40 is certainly should be food for Jared Anderson or F.A. Ajagba to me. I know a lot of fans, they have a name like Tacom they're familiar with, and they don't project to me enough. Like, oh, well, that's Carlos Tacom, and, you know, how can Ajagba be ready for Tacom? Or Anderson's had 8 fights and nobody's lost. So trust me, these guys are talented. They're young, you know, before their prime or, you know, closer to prime. You know, if they can't handle a Carlos Tacom at this point, then they may not be the prospects we think they are. So, you know, and that's how you really catch people's eye. That's how you really wake people up to you being out there. And Tacom's with Top Rank. Why not? And another guy you could throw out there because he's had a co-promo deal with Top Rank. And what else is he going to do except unless he wants to get another payday? Certainly none of these guys. Again, I don't care what the naysayers say. I'll say it because I believe it, and I think it would prove to be the case. No need to be afraid of a guy like a Kubrat Pulev either, who Top Rank has available.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good call. It'll be interesting to see how they move both those guys. Maybe that'll be the fight in, I don't know. I don't know if they do it by the end of the year, but who knows? Maybe in a year or something like that, too. We'll see how they match them. On to the Showtime card. Obviously, Boots Ennis took care of Lipinets. You know, the 5th round was a closer round. There were some closer moments, you could say. There was some good inside action, no doubt about it. Boots was just, you know, had the crisper shots, had the body work. Even in the 2nd round, Lipinets landed a clean right hand. So Lipinets had his moments. We did kind of want to see how Ennis would respond to getting clipped by big shots. But overall, to do what he did in that moment where it was kind of like, okay, this is a step up to really kind of showcase you in a sense to see just how good you are. How do you think Ennis performed against a tough guy and a good strong puncher in Lipinets?
Well, he gets an A for that one because he faced Lipinets is a legit contender. He went into the fight transnational ranked number 9. You know, we're talking about legit ratings there, so that's what you want to look at. You know, you forget alphabet stuff, which just doesn't make any sense. So legit contender. I mean, that's a real step up when you face a legit contender. So that's Ennis. It was good that PBC got him that opportunity because I think there are other good fighters that would like to have that opportunity that maybe don't. And Ennis got it, and he took advantage. He's facing a legit contender in Lipinets, and then he took care of business impressively, got him out of there, didn't let him hang around, didn't play it overly safe. And that's what the fans want to see. And, you know, was on Showtime, on a good card. So really, you know, perfect, under the circumstances, just about a perfect outing for Ennis. Heard a couple nitpickers saying he got hit with a couple of right hands. And all I attribute that to is, I mean, he's fighting a real contender. You know, this is not where you're fighting some guy who's not legit top 10. I mean, the guy can punch back. You know, the guy
right.
The guy has something, and that's the difference. I mean, you know, you mentioned Delorme earlier, and we'll get to that, but you know, Lipinets and Delorme brought resistance. I mean, Lipinets, as we expected he might be, ended up being overmatched, but it wasn't because he didn't bring resistance, you know, and that's where he landed a few good right hands. So I don't really detract from Ennis, not that you want to get hit, but he's focused, what I like to see, you know, that's what I like to see, firepower, focused on taking care of business. If he catches a right hand or two and he gets his man out of there impressively, I'd rather see that myself than show no firepower and flick a jab out there and go 12 with the guy and win a boring unanimous decision where people don't want to see you again. So his performance was an A for me.
Yeah, and that was the whole point of this fight, to see what happens when he does get cracked and see if he would, stutter or kind of stumble, or all of a sudden you thought, man, he finally gets hit in all this, great movement and whatnot, because he does circle well. I like how he's not necessarily in the pocket the whole time. So a lot of times he's on the edge of the pocket, or sometimes he'll dip out, but it seems like for the most of the fight, he's within punching range too. So we know he can jab and defend himself even more if he needs to. I noticed that he started putting his hands up higher when he got closer after those right hands, which is a good sign. Like you said, though, I mean, that's kind of the whole point. Like, we want to see if the guy got hit hard. You're going to get hit as you climb the ladder now. So why not let it be here? And he didn't get, rootless or try to just score this highlight reel knockout. That uppercut that he landed in the fourth round was pretty nasty. Good inside work, I thought, overall. Like I said, Lipinets made a little rally back, even after getting knocked down. But all in all, I mean, Ennis's performance, like you said, an A, is like a perfect example of why we're doing this next segment here in a little bit, because he's kind of like one of the top guys that we talk about over the next 5 to 10 years that is probably going to be here to stay, win, lose, or draw. What'd you think of the co-feature? It seemed like, we got the Stanionis and Delorme. Once again, the first 3 rounds, I'm not saying you have to give all 3 of them to Delorme, but I thought he won 2 out of the first 3 personally, at least 2-2 after 4. I thought he was using his jab really well. What'd you think of the adjustments that Stanionis had to make? Because for a while it seemed like he was just bringing his jab and not a whole lot, and he was following. What'd you think of his performance and how he got over the hump and pretty much won very cleanly after that?
I thought it, good, because I like, of course, we want to see as many fighters as we can, and I always enjoy these fights actually when I've seen a lot of both guys, because and then I can help fans who maybe didn't get to see him as much, because Delorme and Stanionis I've both seen a lot of from earlier in their career, and really the way I would categorize it, it was a typical Stanionis performance against his toughest opponent, who fought well in the fight and came to win. So that's where I give him a good grade. And you described what he does pretty much perfectly, Chris. If you watch him a lot, he's a decent puncher. He's not feather-fisted, but people who see him who haven't seen him a lot might think he's a bigger puncher than he is. He's not a massive puncher. He's more of an average puncher, and he takes a little bit to get going. Like you said, he will have maybe his own jab out there some. He's a competent boxer, likes to work his way in and start putting the pressure on, and then he likes to keep ramping up the pressure and wear you down. Now, he's not a irresponsible slugger, but he's going to keep coming forward, putting that pressure on, and then with his average to maybe a little bit above average punching, but not huge punching, he with him then he just starts piling up the volume on you, and some guys he'll get out of there with that, and some guys he won't, and that's what happened with Delorme. You could see that even with Delorme, because at the end Stanionis was just about on the verge of getting him out of there, and that's kind of what can happen with him is, you see guys getting worn down, he just keeps coming, he keeps banging them to the body, the head, good punch variety, keeps the pressure on. He's got very good stamina. So far, he looks to take a real good shot, and that's the way he's going to keep fighting. Now, probably what'll be tough for him in the future is when he faces a guy that gives resistance and punches harder than he does. that's going to be interesting to see, because then it's going to be, a war of his chin and pressure against somebody who could put some hurt on him and maybe isn't getting as hurt as much, and see who comes out on top. But that's going to be his high water mark, where we'll see if he can get over that, or that is his high water mark. But Delorme, who's got good pop, but not tremendous pop, but good pop, he landed a lot of good shots, and, Stanionis held up well, and he definitely won the fight coming on strong down the stretch. So good performance by him. He just doesn't really, since it's somewhat almost comparable, because Delorme is a tough guy. He's on the edge of the top 10. Lipinets was just in the top 10, but in that sense, not that difference of a talent level, even though they're different styles of fighters. So you could say, really, that's the difference with an Ennis and a Stanionis, even though they fight in different styles. Even though Ennis is maybe a little more of a boxer, he's got more firepower. So, he was able to turn the lights out on Lipinets, by midpoint of the fight, and Stanionis could not do that to Delorme, and that's a little bit of the difference in the firepower between those two guys.
Now, Ancanas and Jonathan Rodriguez, I believe his first name was, I didn't think a whole lot of this fight coming in. Didn't even really preview and predict it per se. This was a fun fight. This may have been the best two-way fight, I believe, of the Showtime. I don't think it may. I think it was. What'd you think of this one? Because, like I said, this one kind of surprised me a little bit. Ancanas, went to the body a whole lot. Like I'm looking at the thing, the CompuBox, 131-44. But the power shots, Rodriguez, 253-176. This was a competitive fight. What'd you think of the opener? Because it kind of surprised me. Not that it was entertaining, but how damn competitive it was.
I was also surprised how entertaining it was. That was arguably fight of the year so far. Maybe hipsters don't want to hear that because they've already got their mind set on Estrada and Chocolatito. But I've got no problem saying it, because I know what I saw, and I saw both fights, and I saw more power back and forth action between Ancajas and Rodriguez than I did with Estrada and Chocolatito. And those guys are in their 30s. That's a heavy. That's a high age for 115 pounders. And Sorong Bisai, is getting into his mid 30s as well. I mean, those are not young ages for those weights. Rodriguez is young, and Ancajas is 29 years old. We're not going to see it with boxing politics, and I'm not trying to be contrarian, but I do think the facts need to be stated. Now, this was a better fight than I expected it would be in terms of action, because Ancajas has had some snoozers against some lesser opponents. I'll say that. But I thought in this fight, he showed his talent level, because he got a variety of punches, and we've seen him with some boxing skill before, but he was unloading with some power in this fight. He looked like a guy that wanted to make a statement, and he hurt Rodriguez bad to the body a few times, but Rodriguez, bounced back and came back, and Rodriguez, it's been it was against lesser opposition, but guy had a good KO percentage and showed even in this fight was landing some good power shots. I actually thought, as much hurt as Ancajas had put on Rodriguez kept landing that left hook. I thought he might get to him with it. I mean, he looked on the verge of shaking him up with it to me a few times, but to Ancajas' credit, the guy just kept coming, walking through that fire and landing his own power shots. I just haven't seen that type of a fight from him before myself, and that was impressive to me. And I think what fans need to look at is, I think Rodriguez is like 25, so that's when you're looking more at prime guys for those weight classes. And Cajas, even he's getting a little older, but he's 29. We won't see it with the boxing politics, but we're talking about, even though they've had great careers, I think some people are going to get caught up talking a lot about the Chocolatito Estrada, Sorong Visai, and even though that's interesting and everything, these guys are older, and they might not be able to hold off some of the younger guys, at 115 pounds, or, nobody talks about them fighting at bantamweight, even though it's 3 pounds north. And it's not that there's that much depth right now, but of course we know Inoue's there. So, I think we got to maybe keep a little perspective there on the Chocolatito Estrada, Sorong Visai rivalry. And, Quadras has been in there, and he looks like a guy past his best. I mean, we're talking about guys in their, those top 3 guys in their 30s, and Donnie Nietes is back. He's 38. And Cajas is much more in his prime than those other guys.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, no doubt about it. Any other items from the weekend? Obviously, that Courtney and they say Courtney, but it looks like Courtney the way they spell it. But Courtney and Bridges actually was a lot funner fight than I thought. I had seen Courtney, I think, twice before, and I like the way she pivots. I like the way she boxes well. Bridges brought the pressure a whole lot considering where she's at in her boxing career. Neither of them had a lot of pro fights, but, the lack of amateur experience and whatnot, that was pretty fun because Bridges just kept, coming and coming and coming. And there wasn't much to take out of the Conor Ben, Samuel Vargas, because the early stoppage, besides that he did buzz him and hurt him early. Anything else that you want to talk about? Maybe you want to touch upon anything of that?
Well, I do want to give credit to Courtney and Bridges. I mean, that was a heck of a good fight. Credit to both women, the way they fought, good skill level. Like you said, Chris, neither of them had many pro fights, and Bridges' caliber opposition hadn't been good up to that point. But just look at what they brought in the ring. And I saw some people afterward, even though they acknowledged the fight was good, kind of trying to be snide, knocking the skill level. I didn't see any problems with that. And I was shocked with Bridges because she's 34 years old as well and fighting at a lower weight, 118 pounds. She was throwing good combinations. I mean, good, nice combinations, and I agree with you. Courtney, even though she's picked up a loss and got dropped in it, I still have liked the skill level that she's shown so far throughout her career, even though it's early on. And I thought they both fought very, very well. It was a really good fight. One of the better fights of the year. I don't think there's any problem with saying that, and I didn't see any reason to knock either woman in that fight. I mean, and Bridges had a swollen eye that was shut, and she kept battling through, and back and forth action. Really good fight. I really enjoyed it. And then Conor Ben, he came out looking explosive. Got to give that to him, and quick. I thought the fight was stopped a hair quick. I'm not going to say the result would have been any different. Samuel Vargas, he never impressed me, but then, I got to be fair. I was saying on the show last week, not that he's ever impressed me, but he looked like he was fighting for him a little bit better in some of his more recent fights. But, I want to try to be fair to Conor Ben, but then it did take my mind back. When I'd seen Vargas earlier in his career, and I did mention this last week, when he fought Danny Garcia and Errol Spence, I mean, he was pretty darn bad. I mean, those guys are good, but he was pretty darn bad. Now, did he go out and around? No, he didn't go out and around. He went out, though, and he had nothing going the whole fight. But, he was a little more competitive against Collazo, but Collazo was in his late 30s, and he dropped Amir Khan. Khan was coming back, well past his best, whatever it was. And, Khan won the fight, but he got dropped by him. But and then, Virgil Ortiz, he showed me some heart hanging in there because Ortiz is a puncher. Was not Ortiz's best performance. So all I can say is good for Conor Ben. I mean, he did what he needed to do, but I did see some segments. There does seem to be a wild mix of even knowledgeable people on Conor Ben right now, because I saw some knowledgeable people. To me, this was way out in left field, saying he's a top 10 welterweight now, which he's not off of that, even though he did what he had to do. And then I saw some people who, even UK people like, well, I like the performance, but he needs much more development. He can't get near an Avanesyan. And again, I think some people clutch the pearls too much on certain fighters stepping up. And I'm not saying what Conor Benn's going to necessarily be or not, but I think he's ready for a David Avanesyan. I mean, I don't think that that's too far of a step up or throwing him to the wolves. I think it's a fight he can win. I'd probably pick him in that fight. It's not an automatic by any means, but that's not a bridge too far for him right now. Eddie Hearn was talking about Amir Khan. I mean, Khan can't take a shot, let's face it. And to me, Amir Khan with anybody, and Conor Benn at least is aggressive and throws some power shots. I mean, that's never good for Amir Khan, especially at this point. So I don't need to see that. I mean, maybe that makes some money in the UK, but Amir Khan already said he does. He kind of implied, which is the truth, I guess, that Conor Benn's not going to bring enough money for him to bother Page. So, so forget it. So he ruled it out himself already. So I think the Avanesyan to me would be logical. He comes off a win against Josh Kelly, who hasn't looked that great. Let's see if Conor Benn could, do what Kelly couldn't. I don't think it's too far of a step up. Be a pretty good fight. Avanesyans with match room, so why not do that? But I mean, I got a feeling maybe we're going to see Eddie Hearn put him in against some lesser opponents before we're going to see a fight like that.
Yeah, that would be a good opponent. Hopefully by the end of this year or something like that, because I agree maybe this summer it will be something a little lighter and maybe build that to where they could maybe, get some crowds going later in the year and whatnot. We'll see how that all plays out. So last week we teased this segment about, I kind of went on a rant not about American boxing, but just this last 5 to 7 years of the takeover. The UK, the popularity we know, like year-round, it can be the second biggest sport in boxing. You see Eddie Hearn, how he's come over here, and when he started to talk more, not just when he'd be over here a little bit, but when he actually started promoting here, he would say how difficult, how many different between sports, the pro and the college, football and basketball, and just the amount of entertainment, just a variety of stuff. It's not easy, but in the UK, it can really be the second biggest sport, and some nights it could be the biggest deal or whatever, which is much harder to activate the casuals over here. But the UK, both fighters, like I mentioned, Kell Brook beating Porter, Anthony Joshua would rise, Carl Frampton, Carl Froch, there were some fighters, and I'm not saying there's not fighters now, but I'm just saying we started to see this takeover thing, right? The UK's takeover. It's the home of boxing. It's the biggest, place to draw the crowds and whatnot. And in some ways it can be. But also once the Russian Kovalev and of course, Ukrainians in Lomachenko and Usyk, and we just kept hearing about the takeover. The Eastern European, now Uzbekistan, you got to throw into that as well. The former Soviet Union, however you want to say it, right? Because that's kind of how it was said about 5 years ago. The former, former Soviet Union, whatever. I shouldn't say whatever because I know the details. I know there's a sharp contrast of that. That's why I tried to put Uzbekistan on its own because, a lot of that comes from the amateurs and now them turning pro and then turning pro and coming a lot of times to the States and whatnot. So we just kept hearing this takeover. They're going to take it over. It's over. And a lot of it had to do with the amateurs, to be honest. Now, once, Golovkin and Kovalev and Usyk, like I mentioned, Lomachenko, these guys started, dominating their division and some of the fighters in their division, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, these guys, not only did they turn pro, but they did it pretty fast. You know what I mean? Now, we've seen that with some Cubans, and Gamboa was moved pretty fast and whatnot, but you just kept hearing the takeover, but a lot of it had to do with a couple of very talented guys, but also the amateurs. And I think when you look back at that, we said this last week, I've said it from time to time over the years, when you look at that 2012 team that didn't medal at all, and now you look at, I'm not saying it's the deepest team in the last 20 years. I'm not trying to say all that. I'm just saying, like, there was actually a fair, like, if there was that many champions from, wherever, it would be something. They go, wow, because obviously we struggle in a lot of times on that Olympic level. So, it's funny because the last chunk of years, we've really started to see this talent, and maybe it's because the talent is turning pro earlier. We talked about this last week, the age 19 thing, how Floyd Mayweather has to have something with this effect. We don't know exactly what, but it's something I've just kind of realized the last couple of years, that his influence when these kids were 8 and 10 and 12 and 15, and that goes for women's boxing as well here. It's just the whole takeover thing. If we're talking like the foreseeable future, like the 2020s, right? When you look at the amount of prime guys from 3 to 5 years, let's say, when you look at the contenders and when you look at some of these prospects, it's a lot deeper than folks think. And instead of ranting about it like I did last week, we're going to get into some of that detail. But just kind of break down some of your thoughts on this. I know we talked about it last week, but we can start kind of going through the list of guys, and it's just way deeper than you think. And the first thing they're going to say, John, and this, I already got this, well, the population. And that is fair, but you're the ones who said you were going to take us over, though, so now you can't use population then. Or if you want to put all the Eastern European, Uzbekistan, Russia, UK, you want to put all that stuff together, then there's your population. It's kind of funky that way because we know we have a high population, but that's part of you saying that you're going to do the U.S. takeover. What are your thoughts on that? Because I've seen a trend since 2014, 15, 16 on Twitter that this is just this had a lot of momentum until the last couple of years when it's not fallen off, but you just don't see as many folks talking about it.
No, I agree with you, Chris. And we're ready. We'll go into detail with all the Americans in every division, but I'll give you my thoughts on kind of the preface to it that you talked about, which you got me thinking about. I'll kind of give a rough series of events that I think happened that these ended up being kind of, and you want to, like you said, we're not trying to be clickbait. You don't want to do the arrogant American thing, but you also have to have pride. In the U.S. has always been the center of boxing, and that never completely changed. And I think the mistake was, as it never really did change, was this, I'm going to go through the sequence, that I think we've realized now that this was a failed strategy. And I think you're right. I don't think I myself even gave enough credit to it, but I think it really might be Floyd Mayweather, in hindsight for me, who really was one of the main big examples of proving that it was a failed strategy. And it does go back to Floyd in a way, because Floyd Mayweather, he started with Top Rank, broke away and became huge. But let's go back to around the time of his early Top Rank days. Bob Arum, he's obviously a legend, still going strong in his late 80s, been around the top of the sport for so many decades. And he says a lot of things. He, of course, likes to even be somewhat controversial and entertaining. So I'm keeping that in mind. But I'm going back to like when Floyd Mayweather was getting going with Top Rank. And this was when America, it's always been fading some, but it started more dramatically fading. I think, again, not that there wasn't some truth to this, but this is where some of the failed strategy started. You had Bob Arum during those times, a lot of quotes saying, I just make my shows for Latinos. Nobody else watches boxing anymore. And even though these guys were great fighters, and I watched these fights and we all enjoyed them, they were legendary, that's when Bob Arum was just going with, the Marquezes, the Moraleses, these were these were constantly the fights, the pay-per-views, and Arum. And, maybe what Bob Arum was looking at then, which was probably somewhat likely, was he was seeing, maybe you were having trouble selling garbage pay-per-views, but, if you had an Eric Morales fighting a Manny
right.
Pacquiao, you could sell a pay-per-view, but you couldn't for these other garbage fights that they were throwing out there on pay-per-view. And we know how that trend went. So you had that, and that's, of course, when Floyd Mayweather, was coming up, wasn't as popular yet. Then you've alluded to this, and I think this was a big failure, and I've always followed boxing real closely, the fighters and the media part. I find it interesting. I have a background in that, even before my law days and in school, and I've always still found it interesting. So I remember when HBO was doing this, and, you were always, of course, a big fan, so you would remember these times I was following, but HBO was open about it. Then HBO went and they said, we're not going to worry about Americans. We're just going to take a guy that we think we perceive as the best fighter, and we're rolling with those guys and signing them to HBO, and they're going to be the headliners wherever they're from, no matter who they are. And that's when, you started getting a lot of Golovkin, a lot of Lomachenko, and frankly, a lot of, Canelo, based in the U.S., spends a lot of time in the U.S., popular in the U.S., but a Mexican, you could find other examples. They went with this, we don't care if the fighter's American or not. We're going with them on HBO if we perceive him as the best fighter. And guess what happened during that period? HBO's ratings for boxing dropped and their pay-per-view sales dropped, and it became where everything was going to HBO pay-per-view to try to recoup costs, no matter who it was and what the fight was, and that wasn't working, and ratings were dropping. And, I would say out of that era, out of the guys they were trying with, obviously Canelo was the most popular. He became a star. And then Golovkin out of the former Soviet nations, because, you can cover it with that blanket, even though we know, that these became independent nations, when they broke away from the Soviet Union after 1991, and you have different nationalities. Golovkin, Kazakhstan, but of course he speaks Russian, and he's part Korean and part Russian, and this is if you know history, and I've been reminding myself of this history. We haven't talked about this, maybe getting a little deeper. I think it's important. You talked about some of these racial type angles, and then you'll see some fans. You can go one more level with some of these fans. They'll say, "Well, he's from Kazakhstan." And, you don't know that much about Kazakhstan. Well, do you know that Kazakhstan was also filled with nationalities that Stalin and, the Russian communist dictators were sending in exile to Kazakhstan?
Right.
You have Russians being sent exiled to Kazakhstan, Ukrainians. There's a lot of mixes out there from those times, and that's where some of this comes from. So, Kazakhstan was not the fun place that you just voluntarily necessarily wanted to go out there, but you got pushed out there sometimes over those decades. And, some of those nationalities then had to settle down there. So it's in some degree, it's a complicated mix sometimes with those kind of things. Anyway, so HBO went with that strategy, which ultimately failed. Then, as you mentioned, you had a UK, lot of going with the live audience. Fury was dabbling over here. And I think a lot of that was driven by the heavyweights. I mean, we talk about, gaps in American heavyweights, not young American heavyweights coming up. And then, remember Showtime had a deal with Eddie Hearn and Joshua before the zone come up. And they said that they, wanted to market Anthony Joshua like Mike Tyson in the U.S. And, one thing I got to say for Anthony Joshua, it would be another interesting to look at, of course, fight Klitschko, but Klitschko on his own didn't really do particularly great ratings in the U.S. Anthony Joshua did good ratings on Showtime. When you considered he was from the U.K. and when those fights were, but him being Eddie Hearn's most valuable property, Eddie Hearn pulled him out of Showtime and worked the deal where he would put him on the zone. I understand even at this point, Hearn does not have to put him on DAZN in the U.S., but of course he's tied in with Matchroom USA, and he's got interest in doing that, and that's what he has done every time since. So you had that where even Showtime, we wouldn't think of that now, but Showtime was basically going to go with Anthony Joshua as one of their big guys, and then kind of was forced out of that strategy. And then you had PBC make their move. Really, they have all boxers from different countries, but a lot of it was kind of looking at the whole we're talking about and saying we're going to get Americans back on network TV, even if we have to buy it. We believe we can sell American fighters and sell boxing in America. And then, HBO was faltering and getting out of it. And I think then Top Rank saw that, hey, maybe PBC got something here, changed their strategy a bit gradually. Not at first, but because, they were showing Lomachenko, who did do good ratings in fairness on ESPN. But, now we're at a point, look, they showed Joe Smith as a headliner, just Saturday night. They kind of adopted a little bit of what PBC had been doing, and maybe they're even going with that more now because they're not running pay-per-views and PBC is. So it seems like Top Rank kind of got what we're talking about, saw there was still an opening to double back and go, with Americans on TV that people could see. And then, you've got Hearn even getting into it himself with Matchroom USA and DAZN and signing Americans himself. So you would have to argue that Eddie Hearn knows the UK market as well as anyone. I think you can safely say that. And he knows how to make money there and work that. But he now has also understood that America is the center, and I'm going to be running, an operation in partnership with DAZN in the United States. And Eddie Hearn is certainly working hard at that. So that's the kind of the preface to leading to our American talent thing, where you look at that background and then you look at the fighters coming up, whether inspired by Mayweather turning pro early or just cycles. When we do our deep dive now, you're going to see there's really a lot of American talent. And like you said, Chris, if you want to take even America taking on the rest of the world, when you start breaking it down with what the United States has coming up, you probably, without being arrogant, can even make that a competition.
Yeah, and some of the names that I'll go through are kind of the established names, the guys in their prime. We feel like they got either a handful of years left or maybe even 5. It's really tough to say with guys like Spencer Crawford or whatever. But when you look at a guy like Errol Spence, Terrence Crawford, how long is Keith Thurman going to be around? It's really tough to say because he has so many injuries. Same with like a Paul Porter. I believe Wilder's going to be around still for a while. Andy Ruiz is probably going to be around. Hopefully he, stays in the gym and we can see him looking like he's going to, like he's been looking lately. Leo Santa Cruz, how much left? That one's tough, man. It may be a fight or two. It may be for a couple years. So there are some guys that are aging. Even, there's more than that. Broner looked horrible in his last fight. Could he hang around for a couple years? Jamal Herring, guys like that, even like guys that are really good B-sides or still could make some noise. Like Daniel Jacobs had a really bad performance, but you never really know. You never know what a guy like Hurd is going to look like from here on out. But when you start to get in guys that we know are going to be around, even a Demetrius Andre, we still haven't seen him. Daniel Roman is another one. Both Mel and Mal Charlo seem to be in their prime. They're going to hang around at least for, I'd say, a good 3, maybe even longer years than that. Obviously, a guy like Teofimo Lopez is got potential to be a huge name, and we know the talent's there, no doubt about that. Those are just some names that we just have that are basically in their prime or about to be aged out. And that's still a fairly long list that I didn't even hit everybody in it.
Yeah, well, it is. And I'm ready. I'm actually ready to do the deep dive, even by division tonight, Chris. So if you look at it first, let's look at heavyweight. I still say even now, it's the most money there for want to go. All you got to do is look at the money. Americans have not been strong in recent decades like they had been in the past. There's no argument there. But I'm actually surprised that when you start looking at it a little deeper and reminding yourself who's American, it's maybe not as bad as you think. And when you look at the future, it might even be better. Now, I've said this for a while. I'm going to say it. Got to give credit where credit's due. I think in terms of depth and talent at the top of the division, this is the best British heavyweight era in history. So you have Tyson Fury, who is the real champion. Anthony Joshua at this point is the number one contender, recognized by everybody. I mean, I only look at one champ of division, and I'll refer to transnational where needed for some of these. So, but look, number 2, Deontay Wilder. In that sense, he hasn't gotten enough credit. I mean, I'm not even knocking Wilder with this, but I don't care about these types of things. Forget the WBC alphabet belt stuff. Wilder has had a good career. He had a draw with Fury. I thought the draw was fair. Didn't think it was a robbery at all. But so Fury is the champ now. He's had a draw with him. In other words, no shame. He's the number 2 heavyweight with Fury as the champ, Joshua number 1. And, he's contractually, as far as we know, got a third fight with Fury. So the championship, for the United States is not out of reach. I know Wilder would be an underdog in that fight, but he won't be as big of an underdog as people think. So I just say with that, because he is the flagship American heavyweight still at this point. He's been off, but so has Fury. I think, he moved away from Mark Breland. I think he's got to bring in somebody more than Malik Scott. I mean, look, Fury went back to this is to Fury's credit. I think it did help him a lot. I mean, Fury went back to the Kronk guys before he fought Wilder the second time. A lot of credit there. I mean, look, Fury in that sense is pretty boxing savvy. I mean, when a lot of people, even Americans, were saying it was a bad move, not as many, but and certainly a lot of Brits were. Fury just said, I need something else. I've got to get back to my basics here. I've got to get where it's going to be rough and tough enough for me and get back with some of these guys I've worked with in the past. And he goes over to the United States and trains for Wilder and has a good performance and beats him. Beats him by stoppage. So Fury came to the U.S. to do that, to his credit. But I think Wilder, it's got to be a better training situation. He's got to fight differently. He's not throwing enough. He's not working behind the jab enough. And I think Mark Breland was telling him the right things in the corner in both fights with Fury. But Wilder, I kind of agree with Breland there, not listening all the time. I always like going back to the first Deverne fight. I think people who don't like Wilder don't want to look at it. He comes in with his weight under 220 pounds. He moves some and works off the jab, then drops in that right hand. Let's just look at it. It was only one sequence in that fight, but it does show you what Deontay Wilder is capable of. Actually, I can go to a few of them. The second Ortiz fight, when he blinds him with a jab, then the right hand comes right in after that. A beautiful right hand takes him out. Look at even the first Fury fight, when even Fury himself has said this. When Wilder throws out the jab with those long arms and then throws out that long right hand, he's on top of you quickly. You get blinded by the jab, and then that right hand is coming over. I mean, you saw him nail, Brazil with one like that. I mean, he needs to do that a lot during the fight, not loading up, but just good 1-2s, using his movement, being a little bit lighter than most of the guys he fights. He came in too heavy for that fight. So I think that's what he needs. Then you've got the number 4 guy right now, Andy Ruiz Jr. And to me, there's no comparison in talent level that he's much more talented than a Dillian White. It's just a matter of Ruiz getting in shape, getting in action, and he's going to be in action on May 1st. But he was born in California. A lot of people actually don't realize that. He likes to, speak about his Mexican heritage, and it's understandable, whatever he wants to do. But he was born in California, and that's where he grew up. So he's an American heavyweight, and he's knocked out Joshua. Now he had a poor performance in the rematch. Joshua did what he needed to do. Ruiz didn't look good, But Ruiz did go the distance and didn't get dropped. You know, Joshua did have that respect. And Otto Wallin, of course, another heavyweight contender who's pretty cerebral about boxing when you hear him talk. I like hearing him talk about it. He says he thinks Ruiz has as much talent as anybody in the division. That's his opinion. That, you know, if there's a guy that everybody's got to watch out if he's got it together, it's Ruiz. Now, he may not be right, but that's what he thinks. And then you've still got a Michael Hunter at a number 6. So you've still got 3 legit top 10 American heavyweights even now when we're perceiving it, and somewhat understandably so, as not a great American heavyweight era, but it shows you it's not maybe as bad as you think, because you still got 3 top 10 guys. And if Ruiz looks good against Arreola, myself, I've got no problem looking at him ahead of Dillian White. So, you know, you'll have the top 2 Brits, and then the Americans breathing right down their necks. And you got Hunter there. They're talking about him fighting Hrgovic. So, you know, Hrgovic's the top amateur guy, been flirting with the top 10. Then we've got, you know, guys like fringe guys. I mean, you got Adam Konatsky, who was born in Poland, but, you know, he speaks with a Brooklyn accent. He's lived in Brooklyn since age 7. You know, that's where he went to school. That's where he went to high school. I mean, what are you going to fought in the New York Golden Gloves? I mean, what are you going to say? He was born in Poland, but you know, he's certainly a Brooklyn guy. And, you know, we've got fringe guys like Trevor Bryan, Charles Martin, Dominic Brazil. And then you get into the guys that are more interesting that we've talked about, the prospects. You've got Jared Anderson. You've got the very strange but interesting case of Michael Coffey, who started boxing very late. He's already 35, going on 36 in June, but has looked really good and has shown a lot of power. You know, a former Marine who, you know, boxed in the service. He's interesting. I mean, he's an interesting guy. The window's short, but he's interesting. And you got, I haven't thought Jermaine Franklin looked good, but he's fighting Stephen Shaw, who's undefeated on Ring City, USA. Shaw's only 28. Franklin's only like 25. They're both undefeated. And then we saw this guy, Jeremiah Milton, that Top Rank showed on the undercard Saturday, who knocked out a hapless opponent, but guy's undefeated with all KOs after 4 fights. Didn't look too bad. And we've got Tristan Calcruth coming up. He's only 19 years old, officially a cruiserweight, but he'll be a heavyweight before long, and he looks great. And he's 6'4", so not too bad when you look beneath the surface.
Yeah, it's very true, and you know, I mean, power-wise, we know Joshua can punch. You know, most big guys can punch no matter, you know, if they land right. Obviously, Fury, you know, can do some damage. He doesn't always fight like that per se. Even in the Vlad fight, it wasn't until Vlad maybe landed a punch where he tried to return and actually throw something really meaningful to kind of, you know, light him up a little bit. But it was a slow fight that he just controlled the pace of. But when you look at the power and the speed of Wilder and Ruiz, that's still a real deal. And we haven't even, you know, I hate to say we haven't seen the best of Ruiz because he got such a big, you know, win. And we don't know how long this is going to last. That's another reason why I hate to say, well, we don't even know the best. Like, he'd stay in the shape for the next few years. If he did that, then we actually haven't seen the top one. Even that Parker fight, which was competitive as hell, he came out of shape for. So, I mean, just in the one of the – go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I wanted to jump in because I think you made a good point. Ruiz, you know, even though some people thought he won, I mean, I got to you know, state the reality, which you alluded to. I mean, Ruiz was not in good shape and didn't fight good against Parker. I mean, even though some people thought he won and it was close. I thought Parker edged it out, but that was not a good Ruiz in that fight either.
No, it wasn't. He just showed that he still had fast hands and whatnot. But now, obviously, like, cruiserweight is where, you know, the U.S. is not really strong per se, right? Or not even per se. I mean, who do you even have at cruiserweight that would be worth saying, oh, you know, he could actually, you know, take over the division? Because it is one of those weight classes that has been heavy European and Russian for a while now.
Well, we've got Tristan Calcruth, who's good enough to do that. There's no doubt in my mind, but he won't care about it enough, and I don't blame him a bit. In other words, he's 19. He's 8-0 with 6 KOs. He's 6'4", real talented, and he's Ronnie Shields is working with him now. So, I see huge things for him, but I think he'll go for the money at heavyweight, and I think he should. But he is, for people who want to look at it technically right now, he's fighting at cruiserweight. And then it fits with this week coming up, so we'll mention it. I don't know if he's got anything. He's 5'11". We're just going to see. We've got Dion Nicholson is fighting.
Sure.
He's about 30 years old already. He's fighting Efe Apoche on FS1 this week in that undefeated cruiserweight battle. He is an American. Apoche is Nigerian. So, and Apoche is the real higher regarded prospect. But if you're into American cruiserweights, you're going to get Dion Nicholson taking a big step on FS1 cruiserweight shootout Saturday night. So you can check that out for yourself. And if he pulls a surprise, then he's on our radar for the American cruiserweight which any American cruiserweight hope's going to go up to heavyweight. So we know how that cycle is going to go.
Right, that's a good point. Obviously, not long ago, although it is kind of long now when you add it up, but Andre Ward, after that Kovalev victory, was the tippy top of light heavyweight. We just saw Joe Smith Jr. This is another one that's, Jesse Hart and all that. It's a little light in the way of top-level guys, elite-level guys, like an Andre Ward or some of the names that I started with.
Yeah, good point. So at light heavyweight, you got Beater Bayev is pretty much recognized as the real champion right now. Dimitri Bivol, understandably, he's got the win over Joe Smith. He's the real number one contender. But then you've got Joe Smith as everybody's number 2 now, coming off the Vlasov victory. And let's face it, Joe Smith has put himself in tough. As I said last week, there were sometimes he put himself in tough where I didn't even think it was the best move for his career, but he did it anyway. So it shows you how tough he was putting himself in. And really, to me, that was at the time he fought Barrera and then when he fought Bivol. So he bounced back from those, though, even though they were losses, and, kept putting himself in tough, beat Jesse Hart, another American who you talked about, and then beat, Elider Alvarez and just got the win over Vlasov. So, and he's already got wins over Hopkins and Fonfara. So he's been in tough. He's everybody's number 2. So he's at the top of the division, but you're right, it's thinner. Marcus Brown, who I had a lot of hopes for, he's had some up and down performances. He's had out of the ring problems. He's at number 5 still. Again, and he was a decorated U.S. amateur Olympian. So, and at his best sometimes, and I think this is a valid comparison, at his best, he can look like a light heavyweight Errol Spence, but at his worst, he doesn't take the shot that Errol Spence does. And like I said earlier in the show, the modern light heavyweight's not having the way in the day of the fight can really bang. And Brown seems like his chin does not always hold against these modern light heavyweights. That's really his Achilles heel. And like you said, you got Jesse Hart, who, hey, the only losses to Gilberto Ramirez and Joe Smith, and he went the distance in all 3 of those fights. People kind of count him out. I don't think he should be counted out. He's on the fringe, but if he gets active and gets some fights, which is not always easy nowadays, but if he does and Top Rank stays with him, he actually could get himself back in the mix. Like you said, it's a little thin, but when you go through all the American divisions, light heavy's one of the thinnest right now, and you still got Joe Smith at 2, Marcus Brown at 5, and Jesse Hart on the fringe. But we don't have the prospects that have had a lot of fights that have made a mark yet at light heavy.
Yeah, that's a good call. And obviously, moving to 168, most people will give Alvarez the nod there. He's actually looking like he's going to try to clean up the division. He obviously has a fight in less than a month against Billy Joe Saunders. Caleb Plant does have a IBF belt. You still have guys holding on like Daniel Jacobs, and actually the guy that most people thought he beat, Rosado, in that fight. But you do have, three that kind of stand out to me in that division.
Yeah, well, you've got, here, this is the division. Of course, Canelo's the biggest star in boxing. He's fighting at 168 right now. Ring recognizes him as the champ. Transnational has it vacant. They have him at number 1. But this is where there's an opening for Caleb Plant, because I don't care about alphabet belts, and I think it's just more. I agree with Steven Espinosa, who's of course one of the guys directly involved in this stuff for Showtime. Handles boxing for Showtime, but he's a pretty honest guy with a lot of his comments, as I think you and I both agree. He said these alphabet belts are just marketing tools, and that's all they are. They're not. And I agree. And he sometimes says, even though they do it, that wishes that they would just find other marketing tools. And I agree. It's probably that simple. Why I say that is, Caleb Plant is IBF champ where Canelo needs him. That's just a marketing tool. But it looks like Canelo is going to stay with Eddie Hearn right now. So I'm going to make that assumption. And, if Eddie Hearn, and he likes to market with those, if Eddie Hearn thinks that marketing tool is big enough that he's going to risk Canelo fighting Caleb Plant. I'm not saying Canelo is not going to beat him, or Canelo's afraid of him, but I'm just saying Caleb Plant and PBC, they're going to take that because it's Canelo. In other words, that's one they're going to work out, I think, if Canelo's willing to do it. And it is just might just come down to the marketing tool thing. But what I'm saying that first for why that fight might happen, then saying let's throw out the marketing tool, the alphabet belt. Caleb Plant's number 2 in Transnational, Canelo's number 1. That's a legit 168-pound title fight. So, in other words, why I'm saying all this is, again, where Americans are in good position, just like Deonte Wilder's closer than people might realize right now because he might get that third Fury fight. Caleb Plant's on the verge of getting the fight with Canelo. These are fights, Joe Smith might be fighting Bayev. These are all fights that can happen politically.
Right.
That could put Americans, look at the divisions we're going down, you're one step away from an American being the lineal champ at heavyweight, the lineal champ at light heavyweight, the champ at 168 pounds. And your number 3 at 168, David Benavidez, is also an American. And a lot of people think he's the guy that would have the best chance of beating Canelo. So he's there. So, again, Americans, outside of the alphabets, Americans being close to being the champ in these divisions. And when you start breaking boxing down that way, that's tough to do. And, again, this is just Americans being on the cusp of this. Then you've got at 168, Daniel Jacobs kind of hanging around there still, probably past his best at this point. You've got prospects. Edgar Belang was born in New York, in Brooklyn. A lot of people may not realize that. Puerto Rican, but born in Brooklyn. And Puerto Ricans being United States citizens anyway. But Berlanga was born in New York. Right. Of course, developing his ratings, he's developing a big following in New York already. So he's an American, and, he's arguably the top prospect at 168. Then this is the division that we've got a lot of Americans hanging around on the fringe, just about at the top 10, but not in it. You got Caleb Truax, Lionel Thompson, because he did beat Scott, the guy, hasn't fought since. But then you got Ronald Ellis, who I thought actually had a pretty tough showing, to his credit, against Benavidez, even though he got stopped. Sure. And Gabe Rosado, a dreadful. Yeah, and then Rosado, a boring fight against Jacobs, but he was competitive, still hanging around after all these years. He's a Philly guy. And then we have a signing this week of this Khalil Coe, a massive American puncher signed by Eddie Hearn. Yep. Had some, from Jersey City, New Jersey, had some legal problems, but now that's a throwback amateur, Chris. Like we've talked about how things are shifting, the amateur point scoring system gone, the old, that slap point system where you just had to glove and get the point counted, run away. That's
I like that
so
slap point.
Yeah, that slap
point.
That's
exactly what it is.
But why that fits is now you've got a guy like Coe coming up. I mean, this guy is, coming out of the amateurs, had some legal problems, but coming out of the amateurs, known as a banger. which we used to have that. We had that in the 60s, the 70s, the early 80s. But those days evaporated, and now, you see a little bit of that coming back, and I like that. I think the Americans really have the best attitude like that now. Their guys know, as a pro, you want to have firepower. It's pro boxing, power punching counts, and I think that they have the most emphasis out of that of all the countries now. Some of it was lost, but I think it's back. And with these guys even Ryan Garcia, you can look at him as a pretty boy, but he's a puncher. He's fast and he's a puncher.
Trying to bang you out.
Yeah, he's trying exactly. But he's trying to bang you out. Virgil Ortiz is trying to bang you out. We'll go through all these guys, but so at 168, when you've got Plant, Benavidez, guy like Berlanga coming up, and then Eddie Hearn just taking a shot at Coe just within the last couple of days, so you figure he'll be DAZN's prospect coming up, and he's a banger. The Americans are pretty well suited at this division, and as we go through it, again, very interesting that the top of these divisions are all within reach, legitimate reach of an American, which is interesting. So
yeah, they're not even in the what you'd say is a favorable division all the time. I mean, 168 is different, but the ones that we had done before, someone actually texted me, Diego Pacheco, undefeated 19-year-old. I don't know a lot about him. I've seen the name. And of course, we're going to miss some folks that it's just going to work out. They're going to be good. They're going to be great, some of them. And we just don't necessarily – they didn't have the pedigree or whatever, but then all of a sudden we see them and we're like, wow. And that could be from any country, not just the United States. But once we get to 160 – go ahead.
I have seen Pacheco some, and tall guy, if I recall, has had some where he's looked pretty good. A little early on, and some guys I feel like I can tell earlier on. Him, I've seen some good things, some not as good, and I haven't really kind of passed the verdict on him. But was ready to move on. But it's worth saying because this is a guy who's kind of past his window. He was a top American prospect. And when he fights well, he looks great. I've been impressed with him, but then he's had some fights where he picked up a couple losses where he looked like he didn't want to be there, which is Christopher Pearson, who's fighting,
sure,
Gonzaga, who has cracked the edge of the top 10 at 68, and that's this weekend. So I'm just saying that when I don't know exactly what he'll do and what he's been doing. It's his first fight at this high of a weight, but I still will say even at this weight, if Christopher Pearson to fight and is prepared, I mean, he can win this fight. He can win this fight, and then we'd be talking about him as a top 10, 168. So, again, Americans on the verge of things maybe closer than you might even realize.
Yeah, and like you said, some folks don't realize, how multicultural this place is, and they go, oh, wait, that's right. Some other countries, like let's say the UK, no shots at them, but they would claim Canelo as their fighter. We're not going to, but if you look at how long he's been fighting in the country, I think other countries would claim that. We're not going to because we know he grew up there. He turned pro when he was 15 years old or whatever. So we're not going to do that. But even this is what makes sparring a lot of times better in some areas around the country. And it just because you have so much talent coming from even Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan and Ukraine and all that, that plays into, helping out them getting better, but also helping up, when I say them, the rest of the world, but also the U.S. because of that sparring. Now, middleweight, it's not necessarily the deepest like 154 and 147 and whatnot. As we get closer to that, obviously, Jamal Charlo, we'll see if he goes up to 68 for a Canelo fight at some point. But he's definitely there. Of course, you have I mentioned him earlier, Demetrius Andrade, who we're still waiting for him to get a big fight. Definitely there. You have Golovkin. It really feels like they're just trying to get Canelo and Golovkin, or at least hold off Golovkin to try to get the Canelo fight at some point, because that would be still at this point a great sub-getter, in my opinion, for DAZN, because if the thing did $1 million paying $80, you're going to get over him. That'll be their highest fight, no matter if people are looking forward to the fight or not. These are just facts. It will be their highest fight and their most subs that they've had at one time. So, that plays into it. Even a Rob Brandt from St. Paul. I'm biased. There's other names there at middleweight, though. It's just not necessarily the deepest one.
No, but again, even this is what's good about taking the deep dive, because, again, when you analyze it, even in fairness, again, Americans on the verge of the championship, because what people who like the alphabets and some of the Golovkin fanboys don't want to acknowledge is, the real middleweight championship is vacant right now, because it was Canelo, and he's basically committed to fighting at 168. And I agree with you, Chris. Ultimately, for DAZN and what Golovkin wants, you would think that there still might be a Canelo-Golovkin 3 at 168. I personally don't mind seeing it. Believe it or not, I'm in the camp that I think let him finish the business.
Hey, it was two great fights. I'm not going to complain about that like a lot of people do on boxing Twitter. How many pay-per-views end up great fights and then the second one gets better? I'm not going to bitch about that.
Right, exactly. So, but what I like to say, again, with clarity is Golovkin has I would have been giving him more credit for this in the old days, but now with so many of these alphabet-created weight classes, you're almost forced to move around some to get the best fights. What I'm saying is, he's made a lot of the fact that he's just stayed at middleweight his whole career. So let's take that theme. He's the number one guy right now. The real middleweight title is vacant. It's not Golovkin. Sorry, fanboys. It's vacant. Golovkin is the number one contender. But Jermall Charlo is number two. Now, I'm not saying politically that fight can happen, but I'm just saying if Golovkin wanted to have a legacy-defining fight, and it's not going to be Canelo, one of the possibilities would be saying, I want to become the lineal champion before my career is over. Give me Jermall Charlo. I'm going to show you.
Undefeated.
I'm the best middleweight on the block still at age 39. I've made this division my home my entire career. This is my territory. I'm going to beat this guy. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it should happen. It's number one and number two at middleweight. Golovkin, at the moment needs a fight. We're not going to want to watch him waste our time with the Sharamedas of the world. So, obviously Jermall Charlo would take that fight at this point. That would be
and that's how you're going to get Charlo over to DAZN. It's either Golovkin or Canelo. That's probably how you're going to get it. I think people don't realize that. I understand, hey, if he goes over there and took that Andrade offer, I think that's great. I said he should do it. Andrade had an offer to be at Showtime, a one-off against Charlo or a multi-fight. I think he should have done it. But when we're talking business, John, and we're putting on that cap, the only way you're going to let no matter how big of a commodity the Charlo brothers are, but especially Maul at that weight, it's got to be Golovkin or Canelo to come to the zone.
I agree with you. That's where you get PBC maybe thinking about doing something like that for a one-fight deal or something like that. They might not. But
like Daniel Jacobs and Golovkin, They knew,
right,
well,
exactly.
We don't have middleweights. That's where he's got to go. And then obviously, Conley helped that as well. We're not going to just, that helped a lot too.
Right, but exactly if they feel, and I think personally, if I had to pick it today, I'll pick Jermall Charlo over Golovkin. I mean, that would be my pick. So,
I'd agree.
If Al Heyman and the camp see it the same way, they might think we send him over for one fight because we think he's going to win. And then, that'll make him that much bigger. Now, they may not, but they might. I'm just saying that would be for the middleweight title. So, again, you feel good if you're an American boxing fan when you start breaking down these divisions, because then we have a theme here and we don't even have to reach. Again, there's another American on the cusp of being the champion. In theory, it may not happen politically, but he's the number two guy. Golovkin's number one. If they were to fight and he wins, he's the middleweight champion of the world. Forget the alphabet stuff. And then, Andrade, number three, right behind. He's fighting this weekend against Liam Williams. So, he has not been inspiring, admittedly, but like you said, and Rob Blanton is still legit top 10, transnational number 6. So, he's another American that's in there. Not as deep after that, then, you've got fringe guys still around like, Emmanuel Lee, who's an exciting fighter,
right.
but he's picked up a couple of tough losses. Maybe he's probably beyond his top 10 potential, or, he's even kind of fallen off the fringe. And, Eddie Hearn's been showing Austin Ammo Williams on the zone.
Yep, 24 years old, or only 23 or something like that.
4 years old. Yeah, 8-0, 6 KOs. So, you've got him there, and maybe he's going to make some noise. So, not maybe as deep as some of the other divisions, but again, fits the theme, an American on the verge of being the champ in the division when you even forget about alphabet stuff.
It's funny, John. We sometimes that's why it's good to go back and forth, and I think giving us an extra week actually helped too. I didn't even realize the top of the divisions, not the top of each division, but the higher divisions, the higher weight classes, that when you really shape it the way you're shaping it, it is actually pretty mind-blowing, considering this is the worst, it's considered anyway, a lot of people,
right.
This is the worst time ever for American boxing and everything like that. When you shape it the way you're shaping it, it's like, going into this, I thought pretty healthily about this stuff, but now I'm like, man, that is a good point, and we haven't even gotten to the deep division,
we haven't even gotten to
which
where,
brings us right to 154.
We haven't even gotten to where the Americans are the strongest yet. That's what's amazing, and we're not stretching. And why it gets clear is you've got to blow away the alphabet smoke. I mean, so many fans just get confused and their mind gets cluttered by the alphabet smoke. Blow it away, break it down traditionally, and you can, look at the ring or the transnational rankings to do that, or a combination of both, and it'll provide that clarity. And that's where this is not being biased. This is just based basically on, the way transnational or the ring would be looking at the boxing world, and that's the traditional way. So that's not, you're making excuses or trying to find a way to put
right.
Americans up there. This is the tough way. I mean, this is the hard way. When you're saying one champ a division, if the title just happens to be vacant, it's vacant. It's got to be filled by 1 and 2. That's the way it's supposed to work. So this is the tough, hard way too. So we go to 154, and again, that's where Ring already recognizes Jermell Charlo. Transnational's got it vacant, and Transnational's got Jermell Charlo number 1. So again, American, either the champ or on the cusp of being the champ of the division. And then you've got Julian Williams at number 4, Jared Hurd at number 5, Tony Harrison at number 8, Erickson Lubin at number 9. I think Sebastian Fundora should already clearly be number 10 to me, a 6'6", 154-pound guy. He's also fighting on May 1st against Cota. Then we've got on the fringe, Brandon Adams has been on an amazing run lately. You've got Charles Conwell on the way up, who's been on a very impressive-looking run. Just missed his last fight for injury. You got a prospect like a Joey Spencer. People, I don't know why people like to knock him so much. I mean, to me, the guy, I'm not saying I'm not saying he's going to be Canelo, but I think
right.
He's got Canelo-like attributes, the size, the punching. And again, remember the guy's only 20 years old.
Especially at that age.
Right.
He's a stocky guy.
He's got that look to him. Now, where I think he hurts himself as opposed to a young Canelo, we know how well Canelo can box now, but Spencer has tried to do it at this point in some fights like in a Floyd Mayweather type style. I just don't see that as the way he should be utilizing his strengths. I think if he utilizes his strengths and fights in a Canelo type style, even if he's not going to be Canelo, I think the guy can be a factor. So I know a lot of people, whatever reason they don't like him, they think he got on TV too early or whatever, counting the guy out because of that. Because I think if he fights in the right style, I think he's got the potential. And, we got Bryant Perella, who's going to fight at 154 this weekend against Tony Harrison. He's had his moments at welterweight, didn't pan out the way I thought it might. I'm just going to say with Perella, because he is going to be fighting this weekend. Both him and Harrison have problems taking a shot. There's no doubt about that. Both him and Harrison do have some power when they use it as well, and both him and Harrison sometimes have boxed too much, not using their power. That's why this fight is a little bit interesting to me, even though I think that Harrison will be a significant favorite. So what I'm just going to say going in, I don't know if he will do it, but if it's going to be an all-or-nothing strategy, but if Bryant Perella fights aggressively where he can get power on his shots, he is a power puncher. He's not going to outbox Tony Harrison. He'll end up running out of gas and get knocked out, even though Harrison's been known to do that. But if we see the Bryant Perella that's aggressive, the guy can surprise you. So I'm just going to say that. I'm not going to predict it's necessarily going to happen, but he's fighting this weekend. It's going to be on Fox. It's 154. They're both Americans. So, and Perella did have a big amateur career. He lost to Spence at the Olympic trials, so no shame in that. And Harrison, I believe it was Harrison that was one of the last guys to train at the old Kronk or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, something in there. Yeah, yep. You have Terrell Garcia, who just scored a knockout on Showtime. Actually, I almost forgot about him.
He remains on the fringe with that knockout of Germonta Clark, which was surprisingly impressive. It would have been probably the end for Garcia, but that's a rare instance where a guy was impressive enough and pulled enough of a surprise that, at least on the fringe, and he did have a big American amateur background. He was an Olympian, so there's another guy. He's not out of it. So that division is just loaded with American veteran talent and American up and coming talent. And Fundora was born in Florida. Again, with the beauty of the multiculturalism of America, there's a lot of these people, a lot of these guys. I'm sure there's people that don't realize that some of these guys are American.
Did we mention Erickson Lubin? I don't remember.
Yeah, I did mention it.
Okay.
Yeah, he's got.
I don't want to forget him. He's got a fight coming up. Yeah, that's right. As you said, Dakota. Yeah,
and he's number 9. He's number 9 in transnational right now. And there's talk about him fighting Jason Rosario, which that would be a shootout. So that would be an interesting fight.
That would be.
And then
from one deep. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, because then we go down to welterweight is the most loaded American division.
Yeah, but everybody's over it. Everybody's over it. It's not a good division anymore, John, because it's full of Americans. Just like 54 is not deep because it's full of Americans.
Right.
Boring.
It is.
There's no talent.
That stuff gets annoying. You got Spence and Crawford, two of the best fighters literally in boxing, who are both Americans, and you've got people talking about these welterweights are getting old. This division's past its best. This division is absolutely loaded, with American talent and guys that are at the top of the sport. I mean, let's look at welterweight again. Americans on the cusp. Everybody does have the legit welterweight title vacant right now, and everybody's got the number 1 and number 2. It's Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford. What are we going to talk about past it? We would have the 1 and 2 guys, not saying they're fighting, but that would fill the title, so it would be an American champion. You've got Sean Porter at number 3, Danny Garcia at number 5, Virgil Ortiz at number 6. Now you've got Jaron Ennis jumped up there. I'm thinking of even last week. Now you've got Ennis has jumped up in there in that range, the 5-6 range. You've got Virgil Ortiz, Mikey Garcia, which, because the guy lost to Errol Spence, people count him out too much. He didn't get dropped. He didn't get stopped. He lost to a guy who's going to end up going down as a great fighter in Errol Spence. I don't have any problem saying that because I think that's the way it's going to play out, and it's already started to. So you got Mikey Garcia there, and then you've got Jamal James, who's just on the edge of the top 10 there. You got a guy like another Minnesota guy there. Minnesota pretty well represented, Chris. Then you got guys who have been, Broner with, Thurman's just been inactive. Thurman was up there, but he's been inactive lately. You got Abel Ramos is fighting on May 1st against Omar Figueroa, another American guy out of Texas, and Ramos is out of Arizona. You got Adrian Broner, of course, out of Cincinnati. Of course, everybody knows who he is. Then you got one of the top underrated prospects out there, Jesus Ramos, 20 years old, 15-0, 14 KOs. He's from Arizona as well, and he's fighting Javier Molina, tough, tricky opponent on the Ruiz Ariel undercard.
I like that.
We're talking about guys legitimately talking about them, like John Ennis, Virgil Ortiz. You had people talking about Conor Benn. I mean, you better start talking about Jesus Ramos. This guy's 20 years old, knocking everybody out. 15-0, 14 KOs, already taken a pretty, Molina had a good U.S. amateur background. He's picked up a few losses and had a bit of a layoff, but he's no easy night out. I mean, we talk about statement-type fights. I mean, if Jesus Ramos blows him out, I mean, that's a statement at age 20. If he blows a tricky boxer like that out of there, you better be looking at this guy and not saying it's too soon or anything like that, because he's going to be right there. And you've got Jersey's Vito Mielnicki, another one of the best prospects in boxing, just out of high school, and he's a welterweight. I mean, American. This guy's got future star written all over him, and he's got shown good pop in his right hand already. So look at these prospects. Again, these are American PBC guys. I mean, what's not to like about what these guys have? I mean, there's nothing premature about it. You can see how good these guys are going to be, or on the cusp of, been out already.
Yeah, and a guy who actually I think took an L was it Rocha that I think it's Rocha that took an L. He's a young fighter. I'm pretty sure he just somewhat recently took a loss, if I remember correctly. You have Jesse Vargas, who's still in the mix. Jose Cito Lopez. Rashidi Ellis is another guy.
Yep,
27. Yep, unbeaten. We don't know where he's going to end up, but it's still another guy to throw in the mix, no doubt about it. So, I mean, that's really deep with to have Crawford and Spence, right, and then to have Ennis and Ortiz, it's like talking about an abundance of talent. I mean, that's crazy. That is crazy. And we know welterweight for quite some time has been a money division, no matter, whether you like it or not. It is currently right now, comparatively anyway, to the rest of the other weight classes, one of the biggest money ones, and obviously owns, the biggest fight of all time at that division. Any other 147 that we're missing that we just, I mean, I'm sure there's some guys that maybe just turned pro or about to turn pro or something, but we're kind of talking about guys that have somewhat, I got a little list of guys that either just turned pro or just a couple fights in and whatnot. But any other 47s before we get to 40?
I think that's mostly the 147 landscape, which is, like you said, it's a money division too, and it's American dominated right now.
It's too bad that it's past its prime, man. There's nobody there to fight. It's super weak. All right.
Just bizarre.
And by the way, we have 90 seconds left of the live stream. As far as if you're listening to it in the browser on Blog Talk, you can call 646-381-4990. That's 646-381-4990. That'll get you, in so you can listen to the rest of the show. Now, 140 is another interesting division, no doubt about it. Obviously, Jose Ramirez has a chance to, we talk about that lineal. He has a chance to be the undisputed in the division in May, going against Josh Taylor, quality fighter from the UK. He's from the UK, right? Or is he from?
He's
Scottish.
From UK. He's from Scotland. He's Scottish. Yep.
Scotland. That's right. He's got a chance to do something. Both those guys got a chance to do something big at that 140-pound division for their background and heritage, which is always a really cool. Speaking of selling points, this is all the belts, but that's a selling point in itself. So you do have Jose Ramirez. You have Regis Prograis, who, of course, is originally from Louisiana, now based in Texas. A guy that's kind of been on a nice run, and some people, John, thought that he beat Ramirez, Jose Zapata, is another name. He's only 31. He looks pretty fresh of late. He's a guy that, like I said, not long ago was in a damn close fight with Ramirez, and he's from the U.S. A lot of people don't know that.
Exactly. He's from the U.S., and he's coming on strong. Yeah, you got Jose, again, the theme holds. You got Jose Ramirez, an American Olympian, ranked number 2 in the division, about to fight Josh Taylor, number 1 in the division, for, the championship at 140. And again, so an American, it really is amazing when you break it down. It even amazes me when you break it down. Another American on the cusp of becoming the champion in the division. Jose Ramirez. And you got Regis Prograis, who I like a lot, boxing historian, big puncher, and he's also got skills. Really thought in the Taylor fight, I didn't really have a problem with Taylor winning it. I wouldn't have had a problem if it was a draw, or maybe even you had Prograis pulling out a close decision. I thought the fight was that close. Prograis was coming stronger on the end. But Taylor fought well. And, it was a fair win for Taylor, but it was a very close fight that could have been a draw, I thought, as well, that type of a thing. And then, like you said, Pereira coming on strong, fought well against Ramirez in that loss. Then he picked up a win. Since he's picked up wins over Pedraza and the fight of the year against Baranchuk and knocked him out. I mean, let's face it, he had a difficult time doing it, going back and forth in the fight of the year, which really was as good of a fight as anybody will ever see. But if you want to advocate in his favor, Zepeda, the American fighter, he got Baranchuk out of there with a knockout of the year candidate as well.
Yeah.
It was a fight of the year that also had a knockout of the year candidate in it. So he's really come on strong. Then at number 8, you got Arnold Barboza. You got number 9, Robert Easter, where one thing you got to say for Robert Easter, for this era, if you look at who he's fought, again, it wouldn't be like this in other eras, but for this era, the dude has taken a lot of difficult opponents compared to what you see in boxing in 2021 in general. So, at this point, number 9 at 140 pounds, but he's fought an awful lot of difficult fighters in his career. You got to give the guy credit for that. Last outing, solid win for him. I don't think it was a thriller, but picked up a win, got himself back on track. And a guy that right on the edge of the top 10, I don't think is getting enough credit, is another American, Mario Barrios. I mean, I don't know why people aren't. He had the close fight where he won the alphabet bout. I don't care about it, but just referring it so people, get reminded of it. It was very close. He had a tough time at the end, but I thought I don't think that was he got a robbery in his favor or anything like that. I thought he won that fight. Very close fight. Don't get me wrong. Very, very close fight. And he had to hang on.
Yeah, and he earned it with the knockdown too. He earned it with his power.
Right. He had to, exactly. He was the one that got the knockdown though, and I thought he took, again, some unfair flack for that. I don't even think he's being regarded as highly as he should. And then I just like to mention he's a fun guy who's had a lot of network exposure from the start of PBC, which those guys were kind of like pioneers now when you go back to, like you said, 2015, where I think really you can take those years as when things started kind of gradually turning around. And we have the Americans where they are now, just at the least in terms of exposure. You got Cowboy Carl.
We have a variety of guys from. Yep.
Cowboy Carl can provide some entertainment for us. He might not win, but he's been there since those 2015 or so days. He's been there since the beginning.
Those toe-to-toe Tuesday days on FS1, definitely he was all about those.
I kind of got fond memories of those.
Definitely. A guy like Josue Vargas, another guy that people don't know is from America, and also 22 years old, unbeaten guy. Josue Vargas is a damn solid prospect anyway.
Yeah. So there's a lot of guys out there. There's a lot of guys out there, right? There's at 140, one of your
Feliciano too. Prospect, young U.S. Well, somewhat young. He's 27, but he's unbeaten. Some people are a little high on him. Malik Hawkins, I'm not really sure, where he's going to go after a loss as far as how far he can go. But another prospect that's lingering down the list anyway.
That's true. Hawkins just had a shot at stepping up a bit, and it didn't go well, but he was there, and he has gotten some. He got some pretty good PBC exposure. He looks to be like when you compare to the other types of guys we've talked about, he's a little short on the talent compared to the competition. And sometimes, hey, that just happens. But he would be another one of those guys that I think it's proven that he might might be a little bit short there on the talent level.
And pedigree as far as amateur, we'll see how they do as a pro. Sin Hitchens is there. Also, Jonathan Navarro. I've seen some people talking about him as well. So it's some of these guys down the list, you just never know. They may sneak up on a quote-unquote stay busy fight, and next thing you know, they get a big win that leads them to maybe a fight they lose, but a nice payday. You know what I mean? Any other at 145 or 140 before we get to 135?
That's about 145. That's true. Hitchens, Hitchens is a guy that might be worth keeping an eye on. Yeah.
Yeah, you might. I think we should keep an eye on him. Now, 135. A lot of folks this summer. It must have been, just being inside too much. Or whatever, but the Four Kings thing started coming out. By the way, I'm pretty pumped up about Showtime and the Four Kings documentary that I heard about today. I think it's June 6th or something like that. I like documentaries. I like boxing documentaries. We'll see if they can find new angles with that crew. But a lot of folks said, hey, it's kind of with that theme of, forget welterweight, man. These are the guys. These are the next guys. They're going to do it. We got to get a nickname for him and all this stuff. And hey, I love the hot of these fighters. I'm not theme here, but in the same breath, it's like, well, okay, where are we at though? None of them are fighting each other this next time around, so let's let them earn it. Was my point. But speaking of earning it, at the top of the food chain, Teofimo Lopez is at that top of the food chain. I don't care about any kind of WBC this, WBC that, email champ, whatever you want to say, Devin Haney. Obviously, he's got to be thrown in the mix, but this is one of the divisions right now anyway. I don't know how long. It's kind of interesting to see how long Teofimo is actually going to hang around because if he wants to do that, if he's going to actually be stuck on the top-ranked contract, he's going to have to fight all these mandatories and fights at this weight class, and maybe Top Rank sees that, and they will get him a big fight next. But 135 is loaded as well.
Yeah, it's amazing the talent level and the American talent level. I mean, you've got Teofimo Lopez at his young age, who's already the champ at lightweight. I mean, again, forget the alphabet stuff. He's the champ. So you got an American, he's a Brooklyn guy. It's one of those things, again, you need to read the history of these guys. And admittedly, when you don't know it or read it, it can be a little bit confusing. But that's why you need to look into it if you're not familiar with it firsthand. Lopez was a top, American amateur, and then he got annoyed about what happened to him with the Olympic trials, and ended up, officially fighting for Honduras. It throws you off, but he's a guy from Brooklyn who was a top American amateur. So, that's really his background. That's his boxing background. So he's the lightweight champion of the world, of course, with the big decisive win over Lomachenko. You got, Gervonta Davis has fought at 135. I'm not worried about the 5-pound weight jump from 130 to 135. I mean, he's as dangerous as anybody. I'm not saying politically he can fight Lopez, but he's right there. And then you got, Ryan Garcia, who's already moved himself into the number 2 position in transnational. Again, an American coming off with the big KO over Campbell, which, a lot of the non-U.S. people especially were saying, he's not ready for that. he's not ready for that fight. Well, he ended up winning it by knockout.
Right.
You got Devin Haney, myself. He's going to fight Linares. I don't think that's any problem for him myself. He's about the number 3 guy at lightweight. So we've got an American who's the champ, and Americans at the top of this division. So and all young, very young guys with a high talent level. So certainly at the top of the division, the American presence is almost as strong as it is at welterweight.
Yeah, and then the as the list goes down, you do have Rowley, you do have Hector Tahara, who's a prospect on the way up. I'm looking at Jason Sosa. Obviously, his time has passed, but he definitely had some interesting I thought some interesting fights in his career, no doubt about it. Yeah, it does start to fall off a little bit after that. But, when you look at, Tanahara, that Hector, that might be one where it's not even necessarily sneaking up, but that might be one where you're like, wow, we're talking about Haney, we're talking about all these guys. You just never know, because some of these guys haven't faced, like Haney hasn't really faced a top-level guy yet, so you just never know if he would sneak up and make some noise. And anything else at 135 as we go to another fairly deep division, especially at the top at junior lightweight?
Well, you got Keyshawn Davis, who just turned pro, who top amateur that a lot of people are high on, and you've got a guy who, of course, picked up a dramatic upset loss on Fox in one of the best, probably the best card of the year. That was the card that finished out, I guess it was 2019, right pre-pandemic, which Charlo Harrison 2 headline, which is Carlos Balderas, top American Olympian, who's 9-1 with 8 KOs. He's got the KO lost to a tough guy. But, he's picked up the knockout loss. I know he's trying to rebuild. It'd be tough for him, but I think with his pedigree and the fact that he did lose to a tough guy, even though it was by knockout, you might not want to completely discount him yet.
Yeah, in 130, you got some star power in Gervonta. You have Oscar Valdez, who just grabbed, a belt from Burchelt. You have a vet, obviously, who, we'll see where, maybe it'll be Valdez and Herring next. You never know. And Stevenson will be there. But, of course, Shakur Stevenson is a prospect that people are really high on. You have JoJo Diaz, who's kind of hit or miss at times. But when he hits, he's shown to be pretty damn good. You still have a veteran in Tevin Farmer, who a lot of people were high at that division until JoJo beat him. Chris Colbert is another guy to keep an eye on, who's an unbeaten prospect, got a good win, a couple of good wins of late. Andrew Cancio is another guy who, he's a vet. I think he's early 30s or whatever. He's taken some losses, but he did, people thought of him as the legit guy not that long ago, and I don't think people would know that he is from the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Shakur Stevenson's fighting there now. Gervonta Davis has still made the weight. Jamel Herring coming off a good win over Frampton. You got Oshaki Foster has moved his way into legit top 10. Chris Colbert looks like he's going to be a star. Tevin Farmer's still around. And then, people have been saying that he's being slept on, and they may have a point, starting to get a little bit of exposure. You got Gary Antoine Russell, 13-0 with 13 KOs. So, 130, a surprising amount of Americans. Like you said, JoJo Diaz was an American Olympian. Jamel Herring was an American Olympian. And again, if you want to talk at the top of the division, if there's going to be a legit 130 championship vacancy filled, it's going to be,
right.
Oscar Valdez. Is he going to? If Gervonta Davis is going to hang around, I don't think that fight would happen. But if he's going to be in that division, he would be up there. but then you've also got Jamel Herring, who says he wants that fight, and Herring, to his credit for looking at boxing historical type things, says he would like to make sure that he filled a lineal 130-pound vacancy before he left the division, and that's why he would like a Valdez fight. So you just like to see a guy talking like that. Now, I don't think, again, an American on the verge of being the man in the division, but on that one, I got to say, I don't think that Jamel Herring can beat the Mexican Oscar Valdez the way Valdez looks against Burchell. I just don't think Herring can do that. So, of course, they got to fight in the ring if it's going to happen, and they're both with top ranks, so that one really can happen and might very well happen. But that's going to be a tough go for Herring for me. But it still fits the theme. An American, on the verge of becoming the guy in the division.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And you have Gabriel Flores Jr., a 20-year-old, 21-year-old prospect. You have Xavier Martinez, who's very young as well. I mean, there's definitely some talent there, no doubt about it.
Flores is going to be. I mean, Flores did in his last fight what I needed to see from him. I mean, he's got all the tools. He does some things that even remind me of like a Roy Jones. Even though he's a 130-pounder, I see Ennis do some Jones things. I've seen Flores do it, and then Flores got the big one-punch KO. That's all he needs to do. I mean, he's only 20 years old. If he punches with some power, I mean, there's going to be no stopping that kid, I don't think.
Yeah, that's a good. Now 126.
We've got Shakur Stevenson. Shakur Stevenson is capable of beating anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what would go on there, but probably maybe 135 if they ever fought. But just having Gervonta and Stevenson right now in the same division, obviously, we know politics will probably slow that down a lot. But we don't know this. We're not saying what fights are going to be made. We're just talking about talent out of division. There you go. So featherweight 126, Gary Russell Jr. is still there. Could have taken the $1 million offer and gone and beaten Warrington for what a lot of people would have said would be the lineal at the time anyway. So you have Russell Jr. there. It sounds like he may go to 130 and just get a fight, and then try to go 130 basically to be able to hang on to his belt, the once-a-year type thing that Gary Russell does. Is Leo Santa Cruz ever going to return? That's tough to say. Does he want to stay at 130, or does an opportunity come there? Maybe them two fight. That would be pretty cool. I don't know if that's going to happen, but that would be cool. You still have like a Jesse Magdanello, a Ruben Villa. You have some, that Yoet, Yoet Gonzalez. I'm not really high on him, but just kind of go over, the U.S. names, obviously. This one's kind of light, it is pretty light at 126. Not just the weight class, but the depth,
Yeah, you got, at the top, you got Gary Russell, where I think he should have been really in talent. It's kind of worked out. He's the number one guy, at featherweight 126. So, again, American on the verge. If you got to fight with the number two guy, he's the champ. Even though he's been around there with an alphabet belt for a while, he's the number one guy. So, again, American on the cusp of being the champ in the division. Like I said, Jesse Magdaleno, I thought he would have more of a career than he's had. It seems to have stalled out, but he has some ability. But, he's the number 7 guy with Transnational right now in the division. But you're right, then you don't see that much coming up. Duke Ragan's been on these top-ranked undercards lately, top American amateur, but he's just not showing any pop, and that's always a red flag for me, because then the guy's got to be too perfect defensively and he can't hold people off. Yeah, there can be exceptions, and plus you're not entertaining, so you're not building up your profile to sell. So I think even though it's very early in Duke Ragan's career, he needs to start showing some pop. He's not showing any pop. Only one KO so far in his career, but he's one of your top American prospect guys. So yeah, not that deep at featherweight right now for the Americans.
but like you said, I mean, if Santa Cruz and Russell, that would be a big fight at that division. I don't know if I really see that happening, but that would be a big fight. Who is his Mando? It slipped my mind. Who is? I think it's a decent fighter too. Russell's mandatory. I just can't think of it for some reason. Obviously, at super bantamweight 122, you have Fulton, who just had a very impressive win over Angelo Leo. Another American right there. Daniel Roman is something, a fighter that maybe folks don't realize is from the U.S. Ronnie Rios is still lingering. He's got a fight coming up. Brandon Figueroa does too. A guy like unbeaten prospect Carlos Castro is in the mix as well. Aleem, I don't know how I didn't say him earlier. Aleem just put on a great performance, and that 122, what looks to be like it's going to be on Showtime. Maybe they'll move that to FS1 or Fox now. I don't know, but that 122 in the PBC world has the U.S. and some other fighters that should produce some good fights over the next few years.
Yeah, this is actually, again, this is something we don't look at often, but this is really, without exaggeration, this is actually historically good for the Americans. I mean, you look at divisions, bantamweight, a traditional division, 122, an alphabet created division, but still, when you're getting that low, this is about, when has really depth-wise a division like 122 pounds ever been stronger for Americans? I mean, you got Daniel Roman at number 2, Stephen Fulton at number 3. You got Ronnie Rios at number 4, and he's going to be fighting Akhmadaliev. You've got number 5, Brandon Figueroa, who's going to be fighting Luis Neri, another great matchup there. You got, as you mentioned, an American Angelo Leo at number 8, and you got Ruiz Jr, who's looked spectacular lately, at number 9. I mean, that's six Americans in the legit top 10 at 122 pounds. I mean, that's historically good.
And you wonder if that's where Mayweather actually influence hit hard too, because hey, that got him into being more focused on being really going for it per se, being influenced, being inspired. Even at a division like that, it's pretty deep. I wonder if Floyd didn't have some kind of influence when it came to that, because like you said, that is not normally a stronghold.
Yeah, I don't know if it's true, because sometimes this is where it can get into myth. But if you want to throw out a myth that maybe would have some truth to it, maybe not. I'm not going to say it does, but just to throw it out there, I guess a theory would be that you had smaller kids seeing what a Floyd Mayweather was doing and them not being able to compete in any other sports because of their size, except like boxing and wrestling. So that these guys then were inspired, smaller guys, smaller kids, and said, hey, I'm going to box. A guy like Mayweather's famous boxing, and I can do this sport. So whatever it was, it's pretty historically good for the Americans to have this many legit contenders at 122 pounds, including at the top part of the division. And you have these the Barrientos twins, since they're in that division. It's worth mentioning they're fighting, I believe, on FS1 this Saturday on that undercard.
Yep.
The one got upset recently, and the other one is still undefeated. So they're also at 122 pounds. So for those into the prospects in the divisions, you're going to get a look at them Saturday. Now, after 122 is where it drops off for the Americans dramatically. But again, this has been about as strong as the Americans have ever gotten in terms of depth at 122, with as deep as they are at 122.
Yeah, you're right. It does. And even like what a lot of folks would actually claim as an American, Nonito Donaire still hanging on, and he's technically wasn't born here, I believe. I'm pretty sure he was born in the Philippines. I'm almost positive on that. You do have Rasheed Warren's still hanging on at 33. Gary Antonio Russell, is there, no doubt about it. But, yeah, it does fall off. Even like at flyweight, Jesse Rodriguez is a name that a lot of folks have been talking about. Yeah, you're right, though. It does kind of slow down from there. And just other names that we, Brandon Lee. I think you said Keyshawn Davis.
Oh, I forgot. I forgot about Brandon Lee. Should have been mentioned. That was an oversight. Yeah, he's at 140, and I see him projecting up at his size and power to a 147 guy. But he's at 140. And, he looks as good as any prospect out there. Glad you brought up that oversight, Chris. So yeah, Brandon Lee, an American, and really is good looking a prospect as you're seeing right now. Of course, on the power end, but I see him with his size and power. He's going to be in that, and there'll be money there. So he's going to be in that welterweight mix at some point, and he may just do it by going through 140 first. But he's as good a prospect as any. So you got Lee, and at the lower spots, Jesse Rodriguez is a top prospect. He's already a contender at 108 at his young age. But he's as good of an American as you've seen that low for many, many, many years. Very excited about him. And you got, Joshua Franco at 115, had the win over Maloney and the controversial rematch. So, we'll see how he does in the rematch. I mean, that actually is going to be an interesting fight. But we don't see the depth. You get the bantam, just like you said, really all you got is Rasheed Warren, who, did have a top American amateur career. He's already been a top 10 level guy. Joshua Franco, and then at 108 you got Jesse Rodriguez, and then that's pretty much it at the sub 122 for the Americans.
Yeah, and we've mentioned some guys that just went pro. Jones III is another one. Some people are high on Dorian Kahn Jr., Jaleel Hackett. I mean, there's a bunch that are going to either come out or just signed, and the coronavirus kind of messed up people's pro debuts a lot too. So we are going to miss some of those. We're not really talking necessarily about those because that is another layer that will come in and only add to, in a sense, our argument of hold on, just calm down with this takeover stuff. Let's not act like American boxing is in a horrendous place talent-wise. Now, we tend to stab ourselves in the back. I guess you can kind of say that in a lot of places, but especially here, with the platform politics and whatnot. But, when you really look at this stuff, man, it's American boxing is as far as popularity and all that, we can have a lot of debates about that. We can have a debate about, be very critical, not even a debate, just be very critical of, at some point there's not going to be outlets that have 40 cards a year and stuff like that. There always is that lingering. We'll see what Triller has, as far as activating those casuals. We'll see eventually what Spence and Crawford can do on pay-per-view, and there are some what Gervonta is going to do. So, I mean, it's way deeper than folks give it credit for, and I think that this whole takeover thing, I just don't see it, John. I just don't see it.
No, I don't see it, especially when it makes you even feel better when you don't see it and then you break it down, because when you break it down like we just did, you don't see it. And I forgot to mention, too, Sonny Conto at heavyweight, he had the kind of KO I thought I needed to see from him this weekend. So he's got fast like that. Not that big for today's heavyweights, but he has some legit hand speed, and I wanted to see some power from him, and he showed that Saturday with a big one-punch KO. So that's another guy on his way up but need to see. But, yeah, when you break it down, it actually is shockingly positive for the Americans that really, without exaggeration, in almost every division, they've at least got somebody on the verge of fighting for the championship. Forget alphabet stuff, being the legit man in the division. And, you don't have any other country that has that throughout the division. So you've got that, and you look at the depth of the up-and-coming prospects. Certainly, more prospects than any place else, more legit prospects, and especially packed in certain divisions. So, it's just a matter of what the popularity is going to be. And I've been watching boxing a long time. I think the talent level is good. I'm not going to be one of those people that's going to say, oh, these guys don't compare or there's no talent coming up. You break it down, you see talent, you see the Americans at the top, and like you've said a few times, and you're absolutely right, the takeover strategy was not a good strategy by American TV networks, and in terms of the action in the ring, it has not played out either.
Yeah, I mean, and when we look at, I remember in that realm of 2015, 2016, I do remember, a lot was said in general of what could and could not happen with Al Heyman and this, that, and the third. And even now, I wrote an article about the Fox main events and lingering stuff when it comes to that or whatever, and Showtime was going to be dead and all that, whatever. But I do remember a time, John, when a lot of folks would say, man, PBC has a lot of talent, but are they going to be able to put butts? Are they going to be able to develop anybody that puts butts in the seats? And they damn sure can't do a pay-per-view because, they didn't have Canelo or even at that time, by that time, Cotto or whatever. A lot of established guys that were already big names. And, instead of, Mayweather fought Canelo, that helped pass the torch. Also being on his undercard in those huge pay-per-views where Canelo would literally add buys to it as well, that helped him blow up. But we got to remember, beyond Pacquiao, who is like you're passing the torch, but it's not lit as strongly, I think Al's done a decent job, sometimes great, sometimes not so much late, of course, on Fox. But the idea of since we don't have these torch, carriers to where Pacquiao and Mayweather, we know that they built up enough to where they could be profitable on pay-per-view, whether that's 250,000, 350,000, so you could do something at the gate in that, and then they got to fight Oscar, where it just isn't that. Canelo is, sure, but I'm talking about some of those weight divisions like welter and whatnot, and they made guys that, some of the most popular fighters, take away AJ, take away Canelo, and really Golovkin's lingering if he doesn't fight a name. You're starting to see the butts in the seats and the gate totals add up pretty well for some of these American fighters, and a lot of people just don't want to say that, but years ago it was, well, Al's not going to be able to sell tickets at all. He's not going to be able to do that. They couldn't even do a pay-per-view if they wanted to, and then now they're doing too much pay-per-view, which we could sit there and debate that too. I'm not saying pay-per-view is great for the sport, but we usually just dumped on shitty pay-per-views. That's how we broke down pay-per-view. It's been a part of boxing for quite some time now, but as long as, like we've said before many times, as long as the platforms themselves have enough opponents where they match their guys, and then you can cross once you've built that up or whatever. We do need to get to that, no doubt about it. We do need a Spence Crawford, and it may take Crawford leaving Top Rank to do it. I don't really know if that would ever happen. If he doesn't, to be honest with you. But, we're going to see where all these platforms, line up in the coming years. And some of it may be eye-opening as far as the number of cards available. Then again, with the streaming service and the content, if you look at what like Amazon bought for content for movies and documentaries over the last chunk of years, some of it's like, wow, really? This is actually on there? But they needed content, and these streaming services need content. So maybe I'm making a big deal out of, well, for instance, let's say PBC did another Fox deal. Let's just say it. I doubt they'd give them 10 dates this time. I was shocked when they gave them 10 primetime boxes, really 8 primetime all the ways, because they usually use 2 of them for their prelims, like they're going to do May 1st. So maybe, I don't know. It's one of those things where I don't think, as long as it can stay on Fox and ESPN, the rest, it's not like it's going to take care of itself, But I think that is still a value when it's done right and if it's enough budget and all that. But it's not in this horrendous place that a lot of folks. I mean, even this year we may get like 3 or 4 undisputed champions. I mean, Charlo and Castano, AJ Fury. If Canelo takes care of business, I mean, we're gonna get one Ramirez and Taylor. I mean, is it really that bad?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that PBC inspired Top Rank and ESPN to kind of, or ESPN wasn't even in it really, but to get back in it and Top Rank to get its act together, and I look at it like you do. I mean, the raw numbers, if they can at least keep Fox and ESPN deals as part of what they're doing, right, things might be okay. I mean, I think it's an important part of the sport to me, so I care about these things and make no apologies for it. If you want to really do a deep dive into numbers, what I'm looking at, just out of my own interest, because this is not a strong PBC on Fox card, with Perella and Harrison on Saturday night. UFC, but this is why I'm looking at what's interest now. ABC reaches more homes than Fox. The UFC on ABC, UFC 2 on ABC this past Saturday, only got their numbers have been overrated in recent years. I mean, that's an ABC show. They only got 862,000. Now, you could say, you got to know about numbers. You could say, oh, well, ESPN had the Joe Smith fight, and he only did 455. But that's ESPN. They don't. It started later, and they don't get the households that ABC does, even though ABC will put their sports on ESPN. So Fox gets less households than ABC, so the PBC card's at a disadvantage already. You got to understand that when you're compared to ABC. But just looking at past PBC numbers, even though this is only Harrison Perella, I'm curious, if Harrison Perella does like an 850, 900, which is more than what UFC did on ABC last week, that to me shows that the popularity of UFC, not that they don't do some good things, which boxing used to do and should get back to. I still think that. I think people just want to knock UFC on some of the stuff, and you shouldn't. I mean, it's just where boxing needs to get back to where they were. But with all that understood, sometimes UFC's popularity does get overrated, and that to me would be like an Exhibit A. If Harrison Perella on Fox scrapes what that UFC did on ABC last week, that's something to take note of. That's something to take note of when you compare the two sports. And believe me, the network people know how to read those things. So
right, the other two ones didn't do that great either that were on ABC. And we got to remember the cost for the deal. We can't always just look at ratings, right? The cost of the deal, and clearly Fox for a while there before the pandemic was happy with the pay-per-views as well. So, yeah, we'll see where that all, ends up. But really it just comes by to, prospects being moved at an early stage as far as getting them on TV and then not putting them in too many easy fights once they get going. Prospects stepping up against a vet. Also, the mid-level fight in these last few years has been great. I mean, the amount of mid-level fights and crossroads fights we get now, some people, when it was just HBO and Showtime mainly for the big fights, will say, oh, that shouldn't be a main event. But, some of these I think people kind of forget that. Well, the casuals don't know. They don't know but 5 fighters anyway. So if you put an equally matched mid-level, they may end up starting liking one of these guys. So if Fox can get back to like 3 or 4 times a year putting a key fight like Charlo Harrison and her, J-Rock and that type of thing, if they can get back to that as their budget improves next year or whatever, or at the end of this year, middle summer, whatever, the Deonte Wilder Fury thing could be messing things up for Fox in the budget, as could the potential to pitch something to Canelo too. The earmark budget might be into that stuff too. So we're going to find out exactly what that goes. But yeah, I think having ESPN And Fox, especially the way Fox, whether it's Fox or FS1, the way they push their fights is something that we need. You know, they really do push their fights.
Yeah, it does help. And you know what Al Heyman and PBC are doing, even though sometimes we don't like the matchup. And it's understandable for the fans to not like it and wish you'd get, like you said, which I would prefer sometimes, an even matchup. With that part understood, you know, to get a future potential star like Vito Mielnicki, I mean, they're putting him out there on Fox. He's going to be out there again this Saturday. I mean, but that's big, though, you know, down the road. And that's what, you know, Al Heyman and PBC see is, you know, I mean, a young guy like Vito Mielnicki, who's not even 20 years old yet, I mean, him getting seen by, you know, 850, 900,000 viewers, you know, now they're getting him out there. This is his second time on Fox. I mean, you know, think of him just getting a few years of that. Again, if their Fox deal's still in place, I mean, the guy's going to be big sooner or later. I mean, that's going to happen. So, especially prospectively, when you're talking about boxing, you know, compared to where it was, where you were getting exposure. So, I mean, that's something that they are putting the future investment in. They're putting that in the bank, let's face it.
And especially in the fall, and even, you know, college basketball, like ESPN does a good job of having, although some of the fans hate waiting for an end of a game, that stuff does help. When they have those healthy lead-ins, that helps no matter what. I know a lot of people don't like to wait for it. I get it, especially in the East Coast. But that helps a lot, too. And the way ESPN closed last year was really damn good. So I appreciate you taking time out. This is a long stretch for you. I appreciate it, John. Any final words or anything like that? That was a lot of fun. Even more in-depth than I even thought, to be honest with you. This has been great.
Yeah, no problem, Chris. Good doing it. Yeah, we did an epic here. This one can be kept up for later listening for anybody that wants to go through the epic American deep dive. But we got it all out there, so that was fun. No, that's it. I think we actually did lead into everything, which is, you know, we've got the Fox card and the FS1 card this weekend. Then you've got, again, with the American theme, you've got Andrade's fighting Liam Williams on DAZN.
Hey, Jake Paul's American too, John. Jake Paul's American too.
Jake Paul's American too, and so is Askren. And you know, I'm not down on that stuff like some people. I mean, I'll watch those things. That one's somewhat interesting, and I don't see how it hurts boxing because I've got a 13-year-old niece and a 15-year-old niece, and they know who the Pauls are. And they know that they fight. So it's just the example of what we talk about. It may not be something you look at, but then when you talk with kids that age, oh, it's the Pauls, you know, like it's just like common household names. So I don't think it's a bad thing. We'll wrap it up, but even that's an American thing, a bit interesting because Askren, you know, even though it's been MMA, and you know, of course where I kind of, the slight interest for me is he's fought, but he's not a natural fighter because he was a wrestler. But, you know, you even see guys that are good in UFC and MMA. I mean, guys like Askren who were like legit Division I, top wrestling talents. Paul, you know, hasn't, you know, although I guess he could say, I knocked out Nate Robinson. He was a legit Division I talent. Of course, not as a wrestler or a boxer, but he, as an athlete, you know, basketball and football.
Yeah, football and basketball, because he played corner,
football
too.
And basketball. So maybe that theory's not going to hold, that maybe, you know, the Pauls, just like some people are saying, you know, they have just at this point put enough gym time in where guys are not going to be walking off the street no matter what kind of athletic ability they had or MMA ability even and beating them in a boxing match. And that's what the odds makers say. But we'll find out that one Saturday night too.
All right, buddy. Well, you take it easy, man. This was fun.
Yeah, it was, Chris. Good talking with you.
Definitely. You take it easy. Have a good one.
Take care. Have a good one.
You too. All righty. And you know what's funny? Like, if you think about, because my nephews are all on this as well, and that's just how it goes. Females, you know, teenage girls, early 20 girls. Not trying to bring that up for some weird stuff. I'm just saying it is exposing them. And one thing that we can't forget is, especially, young dudes, teenagers, early 20s. Now, they're going to buy this stuff or whatever they're going to do. They may, team stream, whatever. They're going to be into it, right? And they're going to see the fight, and oh my God, and it's meaningful because it is a name. They know the name. But in the future, if they do find a fighter they like, or a fight that's one of their boxing fan friends say, no, dude, you should come over. Let's rent this. It gets them in the mode of watching boxing. And then imagine watching this level, right? Or even the old guy level, old boxer level, which is still not going to be great, right? Imagine them watching two prime fighters fighting. They're going to be like, oh my, don't get me wrong. Some of those teenage girls will probably be like, okay, this is too intense. But they do see a lot of UFC highlights at least. And maybe some gory, bloody stuff or whatever, people get knocked out. But imagine a 15 or 18-year-old kid. I got the reason why I'm bringing it up is I've gone through it with my nephews, and even one of my nieces, where they actually see a fight. We sat down and watched Pacquiao Thurman, and they're like, "Oh my God, dude, this is the most intense thing I've ever watched." Like this, we thought that was cool. Oh, Jake Paul can punch straight and all that. And he can. I've said that since I saw his first amateur fight with my nephews. I watched it with them on that Logan Paul KSI when he fought on the undercard. I thought, oh, well, this is the dude who can punch right here. He can punch straight, all things considered. But if they're getting used to streaming or paying for this or whatever, imagine if they, like even Ryan Garcia or whatever, they're going to be like, holy shit, this is crazy. This is phenomenal. I didn't realize that, and there is something to be said about that. There is something to be said about that, no doubt about it. We don't have much time left. The funny thing is this weekend, the closest fight on paper is the Askren Jake Paul. Jake Paul's a minus, I think 200 is the highest I've seen, but it's been plus 150, plus 130, 130, 120. Plus 120 is the most I've seen. Oh, there is Sports International. I'm not familiar with that one. ProBoxingOdds.com. They had it plus 100 for Jake Paul. But technically, that's the closest one, which is kind of funny. Reg Tech and Prograis. Prograis should knock him out. Perfect example. Prograis is going to get new followers. When Devin Haney was on that undercard, they thought, I got text messages saying, hey, who's this Devin Haney kid, guy? And they followed him on social media and stuff like that. So in the same breath, though, I can say that I'm, like I said last week, I don't think it's hating to say that you're not going to buy it either. And it's all about cup of tea. It's all about entertainment value. And if people think that they're getting value, then hey, why not? You know what I mean? That's totally cool. I that's the thing about pay-per-view and entertainment value. My thing is when Coppinger would shit on good-ass pay-per-views, some of them really almost great pay-per-views on paper, like the Charlo Brothers one. That was a damn good pay-per-view. But then, now he's part of the team and he's advertising this fight. That's the problem I have. Like, keep it straight up. But that's anyway. We don't have much time left. I'll go over some fight news and just a little bit of boxing Twitter. Then we'll get out. We literally have like 8 minutes left or something like that. It's funny because the last couple of weeks I've been getting either that I'm a huge PBC shill, right, or I'm a huge hater of the PBC and Al Heyman, because I recently had that segment where I broke down, the Fox PBC deal, the main events, how they've been slacking. And I went into, if you read the article, I'm not ripping anything. I think it's funny. Someone out there retweeted my article on Grueling Truth who would never retweet my article. In fact, he just randomly unblocked me, which was kind of funny. But you could tell he didn't read the article because of the, as I'm talking it through, it's a fair shake thing. There's some in-depth detail about why the budget's done or whatever. We went over it, but then in the same breath, so I do that and I'm a hater, right? And I hate Al Heyman somehow. It's like, what? I've defended PBC, defending it, not getting defensive, but defending it because there's so much bullshit about it anyway. But also on the same side, I'm a PBC shill with these messages that I'm getting. But then I have Jake Donovan on, who's on BoxingScene.com, and that's owned by, an affiliate who does business with Al Heyman, CBS Sports, right? Showtime. So, and we talk a lot about, he's on every few weeks, and we've mostly talked about Top Rank or DAZN this year in the end of last year. So you can't win for losing, and that's okay. That's okay. That means I'm doing something right if both sides are pissed off at me. Here's a big fight, though. It's rumored for July 3rd or July 10th, Texas. Who knows? Not totally sure. We've also heard June. Jermell Charlo and Brian Castano for the undisputed 154. Sounds like that fight is going to happen, which that would be great. That would be phenomenal. Hopefully that does go down. What else we got here? What the hell? That just went away. Oh, here's actually Jermell Charlo. When that news came out, he said, ain't shit popping right now. Talks will happen eventually, but whoever told you we're negotiating, that was clout chasing. We relevant, so of course it would catch a wave, but I'll keep you updated on me. Don't listen to none of them hating-ass media hoes. And by the way, F their pound-for-pound list. And that's great. That's good stuff there. If Inoue stays inactive due to Top Rank and Josh Taylor convincingly beats Ramirez, he has a case for being top 3 pound for pound. In my opinion, this person says, I don't believe that. I don't think he's top pound for pound. I think he just got in the pound for pound rankings, and I think you need to separate yourself more in the fights that you've had, i.e., example, Crawford against Taylor against Postol. What happened there? I'm not saying he lost the fight, but that kind of gives you an example of what I'm looking for if I'm going to put you in the top 3. This is from Stephen Espinoza of Showtime. Excited to announce The Four Kings, a 4-part documentary series from the producers of Amy and Sania. Of course, Duran, Hagler, Hearns, Leonard, struggles, triumphs, backdrop of all sorts of different. I think it says something about the 80s it cut off, actually. But I think it was June 8th or June 6th or June 8th, 7th. I don't know. But it was in that realm. I did get a message saying we can't give Jermell Charlo credit for beating Lubin because everybody knew he was going to do it. That's not true. That went down. That was on paper a 50-50 fight. I actually went and checked it just because I got a message. Erickson Lubin, this is 5 dimes, was a plus 125. Charlo was a minus 165. If you don't know what that means it's Devin Haney. I thought he said, this is to Ryan Garcia, I thought he said he wanted a big fight with Pac or Tank, and then there's a duck and a hashtag cap. This is off the July 9th, Friday night, Garcia and Fortuna announcement. Don't know where it's at, but we know it's on DAZN. We don't know where the fight's at, I meant to say. Let's not forget, Ryan is fighting another title eliminator when he could have easily been fighting for the title. And Garcia returned him saying, truth is, I don't respect his career, Haney. He hasn't fought anyone, played it politically to get to the title, and I don't think he deserves it. So I'm going to keep fighting good fighters like Fortuna, Gervonta, Teofimo, and when he steps up and wins against good fighters, I think he meant, I'll beat him too. So there's been a lot of, so he doesn't deserve the fight. Mark Ortega says, how is Ben Askren approved to fight 8 pro boxing rounds in his first debut. When I first read that, I thought it said 8 ounce. And I was like, he's fighting an 8 ounce? Oh, no, forget it. Luis Neri and Brandon Figueroa will headline, according to ESPN and Jake Donovan, headline a Showtime telecast May 15th from the Dignity Health Sports Park, a.k.a. StubHub, a.k.a. Home Depot Center. I almost said that wrong. That's just another good-ass action fight that is going to be on this Showtime schedule that has been teased a lot, but it hasn't quite come out yet. Let's hope that it does. GGG went from trying to handpick Munguia as an inexperienced 154 fighter to not show interest in fighting him at 160. Talk about career trajectory. He certainly has embraced the big money phase of his career. This was a little while ago. That is true. It's really funny because all his fans used to say, oh, dude, he's about the belts. He don't care about the money. There's fights for him out there if he wants to fight. You know what I mean? If he wants to fight, there's fights for him. Here's some DAZN news. They actually beat Comcast out for a $3 billion deal for some top-level European soccer. DAZN won a deal to become the main domestic broadcaster of Italy's Series A soccer, home to Cristiano Ronaldo and such. According to a statement Friday, it beat out Comcast Corp, Sky for the contract, which involves about $3 billion, 3 seasons for it. That's huge in the UK. Could you imagine having the top boxing in one of the best, according to football and soccer fans, some of the best content for soccer too. So you got both of them. That would be a huge, huge thing. Looks like Evander Holyfield is going to fight Kevin McBride on the undercard of Teofimo Lopez and George Kambosos. According to, I think Mannix, it's not going to be Tyson and Holyfield, what Iola said. But yeah, they're going to actually. I think he made a statement saying, "Hey, we're going to get the guy that beat Tyson in McBride at that time." Here's Shakur again, dude. What is up with Shakur? Somebody send me a link to watch Boots fight again. Got to steal a couple things from him. He's trying to look for a DAZN stream, this stream, or that stream. It's like, dude, you don't have any of these things? You're Team Stream, huh? I didn't know you were Team Stream, Shakur. That shit cracks me up. Here's a tweet. F.A. Ajagba hits harder than Wilder. He also beats everyone on Wilder's resume besides Ortiz and Tyson Fury. Well, we got to see him knock out Ortiz or something like that. Power. We got to see that. We definitely got to see that. The show's about to close out. Here's Jake Donovan. Curious what level of opposition PBC will continue to feed an unsigned Boots Ennis until his lawsuit is settled. He's ready for a title shot, though I'd be shocked if that's next. With that said, maybe Abel Ramos and Omar Figueroa winner. Jake makes a good point there. We'll see what that does. Anyway, it's about to shut down. It'll probably cut me off here in a second. Enjoy the fights this weekend. We'll be back next week.